Right. Let's go. Kevin, I'm not laughing.
Who's calling me out back there? Who's calling me out from a crowd? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our March 23rd Portsmouth Town Council meeting. I'm sorry, March 13th. Someone's rushing me back there and I'll find you. I just can't find you, but someone's rushing me. All right, first item on our agenda is emergency evacuation plan. In the event of an emergency, we have two doors to the left, another one in the front of the council chambers here. We would evacuate Town Hall, cross Middle Road, and meet at the school administration building and await further instruction. Next, if we could all stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Thank you all. Okay. First, I just want to take care of a little housekeeping. We are streaming tonight, so those of you that are participating remotely, if you're on your phone, *9 will indicate you have a question. *6 will allow you to mute and unmute your phone. If you're on the Zoom call, there's a icon to indicate you raise a hand and indicate you have a question. For anyone participating tonight, either remotely or in person, if you're at the podium to speak, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And with that, we will begin with our roll call.
Ms. Abbott? Here. Mr. Katzman,
Here.
Mr. Gleason,
Here.
Mr. Hamilton.
Here.
Mr. Levesque,
Here.
Dr. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Aguilar.
Here. Thank you all. I do not have a president's executive summary, so we'll begin our evening tonight with the proclamation of appreciation for our colleague and friend, Senator James Seveny. Mr. Seveny, if you could meet me at the podium. Go off my cheat sheet.
Okay.
All right. Town of Portsmouth Proclamation of Appreciation. The Town Council, on behalf of the citizens of Portsmouth, wishes to extend our thanks and appreciation to Senator James A. Seveny for his years of dedicated public service representing the town of Portsmouth. The Town Council recognizes your many accomplishments, including serving on the school committee, town council, and the state senate. We congratulate and thank you for your untiring efforts on behalf of our community. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Town Council of the town of Portsmouth, not only for itself, but on behalf of the citizens of this community, salute James A. Seveny on this occasion of his retirement from public service and order this proclamation presented on the 13th day of March 2023. In recognition thereof, I, as president of the Portsmouth Town Council, have hereby set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island to be affixed here too on this 13th day of March 2023. Now, I know you'd probably like to say a few words, and I will give you that opportunity. But first, I would like to call up Senator Representative Borjovens, Representative McGaugh.
Senator Seveny, I am here to present you a Senate citation. Be it hereby known to all that the Rhode Island Senate hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to the Honorable James A. Seveny in recognition of your public service as a U.S. Navy officer, state senator, and a member of the Portsmouth Town Council and School Committee. The entire membership extends its very best wishes on this memorable occasion and expresses the hope for continued good fortune. Proposed this 13th day of March, 2023 at the State House, well, actually here in Town Hall in Portsmouth, signed by the Senate President, myself, and the Majority Leader of the Senate.
And Senator Seveny, Rep. McGaugh and I are here to honor you on behalf of the House of Representatives and with a citation as well. Be hereby known to all that the Rhode Island House of Representatives hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to the Honorable Jim Seveny in recognition of your many years of dedicated service as a state senator representing the people of Bristol, Portsmouth, and Tiverton, and your faithful service to the people of the United States as a member of the United States Navy. The entire membership extends its very best wishes on this memorable occasion and expresses the hope and continued good fortune to you. Given this 13th day of March at the Portsmouth Town Hall, and it doesn't say there, but I too will recognize you for your service on the school committee and your many years here on the town council and your continued service on the Portsmouth Housing Authority.
Pictures? Ain't get enough. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I would just like to start by saying thank you for this. It's been such an honor over the last 20 years. I will tell you, you learn many things. Not the least of which is for circumstances like this, especially, there's an old political wisdom that should be on time, that should be brief, and then you'd be gone. So I will adhere to that. I just want to say, what an honor and a privilege it's been to serve all this time. Many of you, nearly all of you, many of you in the audience, I've served with you for, more than 20 years. I wouldn't give back a day of it. It's been just a wonderful, lifting, learning experience. When it comes right down to it, there is no finer thing you can do than present yourself to the public to try to do something to help. I hope I've helped. In any case, it's too late. So with that, I would just like to first thank my family. Without my wife Val, my son and daughter Matt and Sarah, I couldn't have done any of this. They're my cornerstone. And certainly all the constituents in Portsmouth, those that voted for me, those that did not. Thank you for letting me serve. And with that, we're going to gather up at Joe Ochi's over at the Valley Inn for a little while and have some food and something to drink. So please, everyone's welcome. And with that, I'll take any questions. None? Great. All right. Thanks. Thank you.
Mr. President, there is a hand raised, but I don't know if it was Madeline was wanting to say something to Jim,
Who is that?
our former town canvasser.
Oh. Hey, they're gone. Jim's gone.
Yeah. You can at least ask.
I know. Where is it? Where's the? You dropped? All right. Okay. Okay, folks, the next, we're gonna keep moving here. The next item is our consent agenda.
Motion to approve as presented.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have our town administrators report.
How about the minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry. Where are they?
Motion to approve the minutes of the
Look the page.
February 27, 2023 meeting as presented.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Now we'll go to our town administrators report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. In October of last year, the Town Council directed staff to work on our work with our waste consultant to develop a hybrid waste management option to develop into a request for proposals. The council directed the hybrid RFP should include curbside collection for the residents of the entire town, elimination of pay-as-you-throw bags, and utilization of the transfer station for bulky waste and diversion items. A white paper has been prepared which addresses options that must be considered in the development of a hybrid option for curbside collection, bulky waste, and diversions. The white paper identifies key areas that need to be discussed and decided upon by the council. We will post the white paper tomorrow morning, and we will seek public comment for 1 month, after which we will revise it as needed and present the paper to the council for discussion and decision. Next, Good Energy will host a community forum here in the chamber on Thursday, March 23rd at 6 p.m. These are the electricity aggregation folks. So anybody with questions or interest in learning more about the program is welcome to attend. Again, that's March 23rd at 6 p.m. With respect to the budget is now in the final stages of the development. Our school committee will hold their last budget meeting tomorrow evening, and I will have a proposal ready to distribute to the council on March 31st. With respect to cybersecurity, in an ongoing effort to enhance our cybersecurity stance and comply with state and insurance recommended standards, we will transition to a multi-factor authentication system with a goal of implementation by the end of the fiscal year. This will not affect logins from terminals inside our network, such as a work desk in town hall. However, it will apply to logins from accounts outside the network. For example, if you are logging into the Town of Portsmouth email account or network from home. Ray McKenna, our IT director, will keep applicable account holders informed when the new authentication procedures are ready to go. And then additionally, last week, Dennis Seal, a retired police officer, passed away. A police chief passed away. He dedicated his career to public service in Portsmouth, starting in 1977 as the town's dog officer. He then worked his way up the ranks and was appointed as a probationary patrolman in 1982. He continued to progress in his career until he was appointed chief of police in 1998, a position he held until his retirement in 2006. Our deepest sympathies go out to his loved ones during this very challenging time. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Turn your mic on green.
Oh. I am so sad to hear about Denny. He was a good friend of mine. We went to high school. I mean, Jimmy Stephanie and I went to high school together. Denny did. We knew each other, I'm going to say practically all our lives. Denny was the epitome of what I used to call a good cop. He had the ability to distinguish between somebody who was just messing up and somebody who was a hard case. And, you know, we had a lot of fun together. We drove around town one time during a hurricane because actually Vern Gorton suggested it. We were on the council and we could go around with the police and see what was going on. And we drove around in a hurricane. I don't know if you went with us, Kevin, but
That was Bob.
well, you know, you were
Hurricane Bob.
but again, so sad. He was a good, decent man, a good friend, and I am very sad to hear him passing. Was it here? Was he here? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. So we're going to move on to resignations and appointments. First, under appointments, there's a vacancy for the Design Review Board. And we have a applicant, Ray Abraham.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, it's appointment to the Tree Commission. We have a application for Dr. Murray Narcross.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have reappointment to the Melville Park Committee for Mr. Ray Abraham.
Move to approve Mr. Abraham's superabundance of town spirit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And next we have the reappointment of the tree warden, Mr. John Fitzgerald.
Move to appoint Mr. Fitzgerald.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, moving on to new business. First item, it's the impact fee report presentation and request council direction on proposal to modify the impact fee ordinance. We have looking up. Is it Mr. Griffin?
Hello, how are you doing tonight?
Excellent. How you doing, Mr. Griffin?
Doing well. I'm trying to share my presentation. It looks like I don't actually have access. Perfect. All right, and you can move to the next slide.
Ray, the slide's not showing up online. There it is.
All right, there we go. All right, so I'm Ben Griffin with Tischler Weiss. We've been doing impact fees and government, fiscal, and economic work over 4 years. We've worked in a few cities in Rhode Island, but most people know us for impact fees. But like I said, we do fiscal and economic work across the country. So next slide, please. All right, so tonight we're here to talk about impact fees, and so
Mr. Griffin, can you give us 1 second?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe on.
We're just trying to get the volume adjusted inside. It's a little hard to hear. Okay, let's continue.
All right. So for any of you who are unfamiliar with impact fees, or you haven't had to hear an impact fee presentation in a few years, you're going to do a few slides just to bring everyone up to par. So impact fees are one-time payments for growth-related infrastructure. We can't use them for operations, maintenance, replacement. They do need to be for capital funding. They are not a tax, but a contractual arrangement to build that growth-related infrastructure. Right, so next slide. So there are 3 things we have to prove with impact fees. The first is need. So there must be a need for this growth-related infrastructure. So in the impact fee study, we want to show that you are providing, or you plan to provide, infrastructure as you grow, and we want to make sure that we're including system level improvement. So something that provides a benefit to the broader town, and not a project level improvement. So maybe like a turn lane or something that would be needed, for one specific development. The next thing we have to prove is proportionate share. So we want to make sure that when we assess the fee, that different types of development pay their proportionate share of the cost of that. So for example, with residential development, we know that based on census data, a single family unit is going to have more occupants than a multifamily unit. So a single-family unit should pay proportionately more than a multifamily unit. And then also we need to prove benefit. And we do this in two ways. The first is we want to make sure that the geographic area of the fee payer, that they would receive some sort of benefit. So you'll see this when we get to, I think it's the fire impact fees, where we do not charge certain fees out on the islands because they would not receive a geographic benefit from that. The second part of that benefit is, if someone pays you money, we want to make sure that you spend the money. So that's the second part of the benefit. All right, the next slide. All right, so there are three fee methodologies or three general methodologies, and they look at points in time. So the first is going to be the cost recovery approach, which looks to the past. So essentially you have oversized some sort of infrastructure and you're going to have future development buy into that excess capacity. The next is the incremental expansion methodology. This looks at the present. So it essentially says, hey, whatever we're providing today, so maybe, acres of parkland per person or, police vehicles per person, we just want to maintain that going forward. So basically make sure that whatever our existing level of service is, that's what we charge to future development. And then the final methodology is the plan-based approach, which looks to the future and says, all right, we want to get to this level of service. And so we're going to look to our CIP or a master plan and identify these future improvements that we would like to fund with impact fees. All right, next slide. All right, we also look at credits. So there are three types of credits. There's a site specific. So for example, if we include park land and then a developer dedicates land to you as part of the development process, we would want to make sure that the developer receives a credit for that because we're including it in the impact fee. The next two, those are handled within the impact fee study. So if you have debt service or some sort of dedicated revenue, we want to make sure that we're providing a credit in the impact fee study because we don't want to charge once through the impact fee and then once through a debt service or dedicated revenue. So essentially having future development paid twice. All right, next slide. All right, so before we get into the development projections, are there any questions about impact fee methodologies or sort of that impact fee 101? Okay. So we'll move on to the development projections. So what you see here, this is how we're proving the need for additional infrastructure. So we have looked at, on the residential side, recent permits and entitled projects. And so based on that, in discussions with town staff, we're projecting 600 additional housing units over the next 10 years. And based on census data for occupancy, that translates into about 1,200 additional residents in those 600 housing units. And then for the non-residential side, we looked at the existing employment base and matched it to existing population and then tied that ratio going forward. So all we're doing is saying, hey, if you grow by a certain population, then you should grow by a certain employment base as well. And so over the next 10 years, that projection is about 366 additional jobs, which translates into about 139,000 additional square feet of non-residential floor area. So any questions with the development projections? Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. All right, so we'll start with fire. With fire, we're looking at two service areas. So there is a service area for the mainland, so excluding the islands, and then there is a town-wide service area. So for fire facilities and fire apparatus, we will assess those fees to the mainland only, and then the rescue apparatus, we will assess those town-wide. All right, so next slide. So we'll start with fire facilities. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, if you have about 10,500 square feet of fire facilities today, if you just maintain that level of service going forward, you would generate the need for about 673 additional square feet of fire facilities in the future. And so that could, take the form of an expansion at the existing site. You could use the fee revenue generated in conjunction with another revenue source to build a new fire station. But essentially what it's saying is that if you just maintain the level of service based on these projected growth projections, then you need about 673 additional square feet. And based on an expansion of about 2,500 square feet that's planned, which would cost about $1.5 million. We're using a cost per square foot of $591. So essentially, this provides the flexibility to say, okay, maybe this is just an expansion, or maybe we use this at another site. But this incremental methodology does provide the flexibility where it's not going to tie you to any specific project. All right, next slide. All right, next up we have fire apparatus. So again, we'll assess this only to the mainland. It's saying that you have 11 apparatus today, and the cost to acquire similar types of apparatus is about $3.2 million. So the weighted average of your existing fleet is about $293,000. So again, based on 10 years of projected growth in maintaining that existing level of service, you need about 0.7 additional apparatus over the next 10 years to serve future development. And based on a weighted average cost of about $293,000, that's about almost $208,000 in fee revenue generated over the next 10 years. All right, next slide. All right, so rescue apparatus, we will assess that town-wide. So this includes rescue and marine apparatus, which would be used, to service or to, provide fire benefit to the islands as well. So with this one, we would assess the component town-wide. So you have 7 rescue apparatus today. It would cost about $2.3 million to replicate what you have. So the weighted average is about $324,000. So based on 10 years of projected growth town-wide, you would generate revenue to fund about 40% of an additional apparatus. All right, next slide. All right, so what you see here, these are the proposed fire schedules. So on the left side, this is what you would assess to the mainland. And all we're doing here is taking that cost per person or the cost per trip and multiplying it by the demand units. So in the case of a single family home, the average occupancy rate in Portsmouth is 2.42 persons per household. So we would say $415.58 times 2.42 persons per household. So the maximum allowable fee that you could charge for fire infrastructure to the mainland is $1,006. On the right side, you see the town-wide. So essentially what you would charge, if you were not on the mainland or you were on the islands. And so that fee, because they would not be paying towards fire facilities and apparatus, since they do provide their own, would be $192 for a single family unit. So are there any questions related to the proposed fire fees? Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So next up, we have Parks and Recreation. So this would be a town-wide service area. We're looking at 2 components, both using the incremental methodology. So essentially meant to maintain that existing level of service. So the next slide, we'll see the existing parkland. So you have about 190 acres of parkland, and assuming a $50,000 acquisition cost per acre to maintain the existing level of service, you'd need about 12 additional acres over the next 10 years. And at $50,000 per acre, that's about $600,000 in fee revenue to acquire additional parkland. All right, next slide. These are the park improvements. So you have 34 existing park improvements today with a replication cost of about $7.2 million. So the weighted average of your existing amenities is about $210,000. So maintaining that level of service over the next 10 years, you would need about 2 additional park improvements or growth-related park improvements, and that would generate about $450,000 in fee revenue. All right, and the next slide. So again, taking that cost per person times the persons per household, the maximum allowable fee for a single family unit for growth-related parks and recreation needs is $2,120. All All right, so there are any questions for the parks and recreation fees? Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So for police, we would have a town-wide service area. With this, we're looking at police facilities where we want to use the cost recovery methodology to recover some outstanding debt. And then for police vehicles, we want to use the incremental methodology to maintain the existing level of service. So on the next slide, we should see the police facilities. So your existing police station is 23,000 square feet. You issued $10,000 worth of debt to construct that. And so what we're doing here is saying, all right, we want to recover this, the growth related share of this debt. 2038 is the final year of debt repayment. So we're just going to allocate the cost of that $10 million debt to all development in 2038. So we treat everyone the same. And based on that, the growth related share of the debt is about $921,000. So over the next 10 years, you could recoup about $921,000 from future development. All right, next slide. All right, so for police vehicles, you have 29 vehicles today with a replacement cost of about $2 million. So the weighted average of your existing fleet is about $70,000 per unit. And to maintain the existing level of service over the next 10 years, you would need about 2 additional police vehicles, or to expand the fleet by 2 vehicles to maintain that existing level of service. And so it would generate about $130,000 in fee revenue. And then the next slide, for a single family home, the maximum allowable fee for police infrastructure is $949. All right, are there any questions for police fees? All right, we can go to the next slide. All right, and the public works component would be assessed townwide. We're looking at 2 components. There is the public works facilities and then the public works fleet, both using the incremental methodology. So on the next slide, you currently provide almost 16,000 square feet of public works facilities. So to maintain the level service going forward, you would need to add about 1,000 additional square feet over the next 10 years, and at a cost per square foot of $400. That's about or just over $400,000 in fee revenue for growth related infrastructure. Then on the next slide, the public works fleet. You have 51 units today with a weighted average cost of almost $116,000 per unit. So to serve growth over the next 10 years, you would need to expand the fleet by about 3 units, and that would generate about $380,000 in fee revenue. And then the next slide, the single family fee for public works would be $1,194. Any questions for the public works fees? Okay, so we can move to the next slide. So this would be the proposed fee schedule at the top. You would have what you would assess just to the mainland. At the bottom, this is the townwide fee, or essentially what's assessed on the islands. So mainland, the maximum allowable fees for what we've discussed tonight would be $5,269 for a single family fee. The current fee represents what a 3-bedroom single family unit would pay in school fees. And essentially what we're showing here is replacing the school fees with the proposed fire, parks and recreation, police, and public works fees. So you can see for a single family home, no matter where you are in the city, we're looking at a slight decrease in the current fees, and for all other categories, a slight increase. All right, so I believe that's the final slide. So I'm available for any questions or comments.
Yeah. Mr. Griffin, sorry about that. Many lights. There was a question, comment. You made an assumption on 600 units over the next 10 years.
Correct.
Is that based on available land or what, how did the 600, how did you get to the 600?
Great question. So, and Leah may have to correct me if I misspeak, but I believe for multifamily units, it is what's entitled. And then for single family units, it is essentially the average of what you have been permitting over the last 3 to 5 years. And so it just takes that average and moves it forward.
And also there was, one of the things that caught me on, you had a land acquisition cost of $50,000 per acre. Where did you come up with that?
So that was provided by staff.
Okay. All right. If, I'll take questions in a second. Any questions, comments from council?
So this is under the assumption that we're gonna stop funding school improvements with the $6,300 and move it all to townwide funding of projects. Not a hybrid of using the money wherever the council and the school committee sees fit. We'd have to change our ordinance to be specifically for town projects and no longer funding any school improvements with impact fees.
That's correct.
Jump in here. What's driving this is the decreasing enrollment and the very slight increase in enrollment. In the school system, we have excess space and capacity in the schools, which no longer justifies the charging of the impact fees.
And the difference in pricing, cutting out about $1,100 per unit cost. Because right now we're doing that $3,190 per bedroom, so a 4-bedroom house would be around $9,500 impact fee. You're saying the max we can charge is 53 or 52 now?
Yeah, based on the assumptions in the study, yes.
Okay, so that's based on, so if somebody build a 5-bedroom house, we can only still charge them $5,300?
Correct. So what we're doing is we're looking at an average of the occupancy of unit types. Because there are ways of essentially gaming the system. If you assess per bedroom, a developer could leave a closet out, and so it's not considered a bedroom anymore. So we've found that either going by size of unit, so square footage, or just an average occupancy for unit type is a better metric.
And then just for housekeeping wise, are we gonna rewrite the ordinance and then come back and vote on it another day?
Yeah, what we're asking is that you accept this study, if you agree with it, and then task us to rewrite the impact fee ordinance, and then we will come back to you, then we will schedule for public hearing and then an ordinance change.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, and maybe I missed this, but how often do these fees get reassessed or adjusted?
I believe, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have to reevaluate this once every 5 years. I could be wrong. Mr. Griffin, do you remember the time period?
It's 5 or 6 years. We generally say every 3 to 5 years, update it. And then, if, growth projections change drastically from what we're projecting, or, if costs change. So, with, record inflation recently, sometimes it does make sense to update more frequently than every, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I guess my only comment or concern, and obviously I'm not an expert on this, is that we live on an island and we're very quickly running out of space. And open space is at a premium that, I don't know where 600 units are going to go, but I would argue that the value as we build out more and more should increase exponentially. And the fees should probably increase with it, so that the cost of trying to build out in a town that's maxed out should be more onerous on people coming in than because it becomes more and more difficult for us to be able to support those services for extra people. So I don't know the right answer, but that was what came to mind, is trying to assess this. You assess fees based on what we've paid to date, but I think the burden is much greater as you build out more and more.
Before I open it up, any further questions?
Sir, you had a question, comment? Can come on up. Oh, I just need you to come up to the microphone. That's all. Just so everybody can hear you at home.
So forgive me if I'm wrong, but
Hold on.
Oh.
Name.
Oh,
Name and address.
John Cassell from Baker Road. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but this seems like a statistical exercise. It's multiplying the figures that you've got and projecting forward for 10 years. What I don't detect in here, and I may have missed it, is any sense of improved efficiency or the impact of technology or change. And these are the things that, if you look at the last 10 years, have made a significant difference to the cost of doing things. And I wonder about the validity of the approach, simply ignoring those factors.
Ms. Scrivener, did you hear that comment?
I did, but I didn't hear a question.
No. Okay.
I think he's questioning the methodology that you use. It's just statistical analysis over the past 5 years as opposed to looking forward in the future and doing a different analysis to see what the future cost might be. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but is that somewhere? Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, we could, we can try and guess what we think, future costs would be. We generally suggest not doing that. I mean, you can include, a modest inflation adjustment. But, if inflation is less than what we project, then in theory, you're overcharging future development. And then they would have, an argument to, litigate and say, hey, you've overcharged us. So it's just, taking a more conservative approach. And then, if costs, stay high, you can, update again and, make an adjustment to that. But basically, erring on the side of caution.
Okay, so that would beg the question, what factor did you use in terms of inflation? 2, 3, 4, 5%?
So we have looked at, we've averaged so specifically with vehicles and apparatus, we've looked at what the town expects to pay for, vehicles or apparatus over the next 5 or 6 years. And we've taken an average of that. We don't want to go straight to what you're projecting 5 years out, because then we're going to be overcharging based on, what you would purchase, the next 2 or 3 years. But we definitely don't want to use, what you're saying you're going to spend next year on, a vehicle or apparatus, because then in a few years, you're, definitely going to be paying more than that. So basically just taking an average of what the town expects to pay over the next, 5 or 6 years.
General observation. Technology, I can't figure these microphones out yet. If I'm not mistaken, this is the ghost of Christmas future. You're basically telling us that we could anticipate in the natural flow of things, these particular things and these particular responses that we would need to make in order to fully fund whatever obligations we undertake. But it will come back to this council as to whether or not we in fact want to go to that direction. If we want to preserve more open space, if we want to limit the amount of development in a particular area, if we want to improve our commercial development area. So, I mean, all of this is a tool to help us basically make a plan in that direction. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Okay, and the other thing is that, and I am very much late to the impact fee discussion. But if in fact a council decided that the availability of, for instance, daycare wasn't something they wanted to prioritize, could these fees be in fact mitigated by certain virtuous conduct, daycare center, perhaps handicap accessibility, making sure all of those things occurred? Could I mean, is it always just the issue of a structure to be built? Or can you in fact try to ameliorate some of these by making the facility that's being built more compatible to what you see the future being?
So, the impact fee, it's assessed at the time of a building permit. So it's meant to, charge future development for their fair share of capital facilities. But if I understand you correctly, if you wanted, a daycare center in town, the council could waive the fee, but then essentially what you need to do is make the fund whole. So you could say, hey, if this daycare center, if you were supposed to have $5,000 in fees, we're going to cover it as a town, but then we're going to put that $5,000, back into the impact fee accounts. So the development isn't paying it, but you're still treating everyone the same, saying, if development happens, we want to, offset the capital costs with impact fees.
Well, for instance, I mean, if somebody decides to build a pier in this town, we often ask for town ability to access that pier as a value to the town. Would that be in the form of a an impact fee that we could assist them in what they're doing?
I'm not sure how an impact fee would work in that scenario.
Neither am I. That's
It-
why I asked.
Yeah.
Generally, it's going to be something that affects the cost of doing business in town. So if you wanted to expand on parks and make it a fishing pier, that would be okay. But you can't use it to create a commercial pier. That makes sense.
Well, it's interesting. You may have seen the former governor of the state of Rhode Island, Mr. Raimondo, has proposed a humongous commercial package. One of the main factors in it is providing accoutrements like daycare. Because in fact, if you're going to create jobs, you need a place for people to have their children. So, but thank you very much. Hi, Paul. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Hi, my name's Nancy Zitka, 11 Schaefer Drive, and forgive me that I came late after you probably went over the school department numbers, but I did catch the, 1,100 and change that will be taken from the school department and given to other branches of town government. My question is, when these numbers were contemplated, did you take into consideration the state funding that the town of Portsmouth receives for education? Because historically it has been going down and the new budget is giving us even less. In addition, the town of Little Compton sends its students to Portsmouth and there are less and less students coming. So we are receiving less money there as well. I just don't know how these numbers regarding the school department were tabulated, that's all.
It's currently, that's the current number we charge.
Yeah.
This is 6390.
Yeah,
The reimagining of the impact fees and what they are currently utilized for is because, as Mr. Rayner mentioned, and you may have been out in the hallway, the number of students that we're educating is going down. So technically, there is no impact of a new house. So we have to reimagine the way we're using impact fees to support the town. Otherwise, we can't charge them, period. Does that clarify it?
it's just that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, to your point, we have historically used the impact fees for school improvement projects,
It's
all right?
Our
the
ordinance
only
is
thing we're allowed to
specifically
use.
for school improvements.
So what's our plan to kind of make up that difference on the school maintenance front if we're not going to have the impact fees? there
Those
anymore?
impact fees could only be used to address the impact on the school facilities because of the increased services or capital that demand that they need to teach more kids. The number of children in the school system has gone down. So it's been very, very, very hard to justify using the impact fees for that. So those are essentially been used up now from the school. There's very little left And because by law, we have to address the validity of charging impact fees every 5 years. The latest study does not justify charging impact fees for schools anymore. However, because there is still development going on in town, there are impacts in other departments. Now, an argument could be made that we should have been charging impact fees for police, fire, DPW, recreation all along. We didn't. I don't know why.
That was a decision 20 years ago by a previous council, so.
And that's
That's
something that needs
Water
to
under
be
the bridge.
addressed now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So where we are right now is we've got this study that's presented to us, but the ordinance needs to be revamped.
Right. So
And then that will be brought back to us.
we have to make a motion to receive the impact fee study and task the town staff to come up with a new ordinance that reflects the current study.
Seconded.
Any comments?
Mr. President, I just have one question. You raised a point where the study shows the rate of $50,000 per acre used. Is that something that needs to be tweaked to be accurate in the projections? Is that, I mean, that's the only thing that
Well, I
I
think,
would question.
I think we can. We have a couple of comments that we can work back with the consultant on. We still have time before this comes back to the council with the ordinance, but I do like the idea of, accepting this. And then if there are some edits that need to be made, those can be summed up and presented back to us, because we'd still have to vote on what the fee amounts are going to be.
Fair enough.
So. Fair. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, moving on to the second item on our new business agenda. It's an update on Butts Hill Fort and request to begin spring cleanups as soon as possible to get ahead of the vegetative growth season. Mr. Murphy.
Also, Paul Murphy, 16 Prospect Lane. Come before you tonight. Hopefully this is an easy one. Just to update you on our request to basically continue what we started doing in 2022, which is clearing trash, debris, vegetation from the Butts Hill Fort area. I don't know if there's a. Yes, I can't see it, but you know.
It's not up yet.
Okay, it's in the letter that was provided. There's nothing cosmic about it. We did great. We made great progress last year on the inside of the fort, which if you've been up there lately, it looks really well kept, clean, much more cleaned up than it was even a year and a half ago. Thanks again to Brian Woodhead and DPW for maintaining what is now a bigger area inside. So all we propose to do in spring 2023 is to get ahead of the weather.
Hold on a second.
Sure.
I'm gonna pull that plan.
Hope you can see it.
I'll zoom in.
Haha.
It's just that one plan.
The map, basically that is Fort Butts. It's a combination of LiDAR, radar, which shows you the contours of the fort over at Google. Not to get too fancy, but that's the only way you can really see the earthworks without penetrating like tree cover. So that part's made up. The areas that say A, B, C, D are really just the areas we'd like to concentrate on this year. And again, we're 501c funded. So what we do is we move in the 30-foot containers, and then through volunteer effort, we fill the containers with trash, other stuff. It gets hauled away. We clean up after. We do everything in coordination with DPW. Would like to move outside of the earthworks. We can't really touch the earthworks themselves because they're archaeologically sensitive. So we're not going to mess with any of that stuff. But this is just a move to the outside of that and clean up what needs to be cleaned up. This is also the centennial year of the original dedication of the Butts Hill Fort on August 29th, which is also coincidentally the Battle of Rhode Island anniversary. is the centennial of the fort itself being dedicated by Dr. Terry, who bought and preserved the entire hill for education and history purposes, which is why the high school's there. So that's coming up too. So to get ahead of those events and to take advantage of the weather, we're just basically here to seek approval for our cleanup efforts this year. And we did meet with the tree commission and had a favorable outcome on 2 March. So I think that also informs what we're trying to do. So any questions?
I may have missed your last time.
Sure.
You probably are well aware that the Black Regiment Monument that actually traditionally celebrates on March 29th.
Yes.
The Battle of Rhode Island, which was, for those of you who are unaware, was largely supported by free slave Native Americans, and they brought primarily Hessian troops who were under the British. The monument is there if you go by on West Main Road, and it's a lovely thing. It's been there for about 40 years. The area of Fort Butts is where the redoubt, where the army was protecting from a proposed invasion, I believe, from Tiverton. And I never trusted those Tiverton people. And so I think it's great. I just worry a little bit that there may be a brewing kind of conflict between the two organizations. And go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, the headquarters of the battle itself, Sullivan's headquarters, which was the 1778 version of the fort. We're well aware of that. Miss Johnson, who's the NAACP in Newport. We know that they have their particular commemoration every year over at that monument. So we've already deconflicted anything that they actually complement each other. It's the same battle. Same Rhode Island, same battle, you know, many regiments, one of many. So we have taken that into account. This is purely just to clean up and continue what we were doing in 2022, but yes,
I
sir.
will tell you that there was a commission that I've actually been asked to participate in that is supposed to be in charge of the Black Regiment site. And I've had some conversation where people said there seems to be a potential disagreement growing up. Has pretty much nothing to do with that, but if you get a phone call from me, you might know what it's about. You can
Happy to
definitely
field any
know.
phone call on that subject or
What's that?
any phone call on that subject or any similar subject. Very happy. Would much rather know about it now or as soon as possible. I don't think there is, but if there is, please.
By the way, the other thing the fort used to be used for is that where you went to have a fight when you were in high school. And it was
Yes, sir.
the term up the fort. I never went.
All right, so
So we just need a motion to grant them permission to clean up. Well, as far as you're gonna get, the A, Bs and the Cs. Right. I don't know what the D is. It's all scribbled out there.
It's inside of the pathway. Actually, D is the entire fort is lot 71 on the town maps. Lot 72 is actually Butts Hill Green. It's been there since 1923. It's a little square. It's inside of those cement barriers. It was built next to the fort specifically to be kind of a green space right in front of the gate. So that's part of if we get to that point this summer, because there's going to be multiple cleanups, then that also is a place we'd like to make a nice spot to improve.
I'd like to propose that we approve the Butts Hill Fort Restoration Committee's plan to clean up and restore Butts Hill Fort as they propose in this document.
Second.
all those in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levet,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to new business number 3. It's the Newport Polo requests approval of additional seating. Mr. Keating?
Hi, Dan Keating, 2503 East Main Road, Whistle.
We have an area of the polo field that is, since COVID underutilized. It's where we put our, a row of tents for vendors. And there really aren't that many vendors, and it's a kind of prime viewing area. If we can do this, we can raise it up a little bit. It's about 30 inches off the ground. And that'll provide additional seating.
Is this east of the current pavilion, or you're going west of the current
It
pavilion?
is west
Where
of
the
the.
tw- where the
cur-
Twisted
west of the
Pony
cur-
is?
Yeah, west
Okay.
on the other side of that, where basically we'd have a string of vendor tents as you come in. So between the main gate and the pavilion.
And Mr. Rayner, this would fall under the same contract where everything has to be removed if you ever leave and all that fun stuff.
Right, the way we kind of designed it, it's anchored by a container that can be just lifted out. And it has not a full foundation, but it has footings that can be just knocked out and filled.
Any further questions, comments? Or anything on, I'm not online. Nothing. No.
Motion to approve the proposal by Newport Polo.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson? Aye. Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levette?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Dr. Leo?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. Okay, moving on to new business number 4. It's request support for the Charleston Town Council's resolution in support of House Bill 2023 H5174, an act relating to Waters and Navigation Coastal Resource Management Council. Mr. Levesque.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I do want to let everybody know that this is not Representative McNamara's proposal that has to do with establishing right-of-ways. I had heard some conversation with the community or within the community that was a concern. This, in fact, an attempt by the Rhode Island House of Representatives, Representative Portman in the lead, to define what is this in constitutional law in Rhode Island. That is, everyone in this state, whether you abut the water or not, has a right to free traverse and opportunity to use the fisheries in this state, collect seaweed, whatever it is. It has a long-standing tradition, this notion, and I think the history indicates it goes back to perhaps even to our charter back in the day. And I personally wonder whether or not it was something that our foreparents brought over from whatever our old country was. Because I know for myself, my foreparents came from Ireland. And even during some of the great famines that occurred, the rich owned the access to the waterways and would prohibit others from fishing. And my Irish foreparents knew how to fish, knew how to cook a fish. And yet they were allowed to starve by people during the famines in particular, who would not allow them access to the shore. It is, as I read it, and I believe I have actually some experience with this, a way to do this. It is not the only way to do it. I personally feel it is the best way to do it. And why is that? It gives the opportunity for the person who is traversing the shore to have a good sense of whether or not they are in the right. It has the ability to let the abutting property owner know exactly where their right extends to. And it gives an opportunity, if there is a disagreement, to actually seek the support of, for instance, the Portsmouth Police, if that becomes necessary, who also would be able to come down, take a look, and see from their vision what in fact the line was. I would also say, because I actually had experience with this, they would have the ability to take a picture. Because quite frankly, going to court and saying, well, the seaweed was over here and the thing doesn't really make it with the judge, particularly those judges who are up in Providence and never saw the water. So in any event, this is an attempt to get a solid basis for what the rights and the competing rights are. I will make one more comment about, well, two more comments. One, everybody I knew growing up fished. And they pretty much, there were fewer people, traversed all over the place. I knew people that would say the blues are running and get all excited. I had no idea what they were talking about. But there they go. And fishing is not, you run down to the shore, you throw the thing in and the fish bite. Fishing is in fact an afternoon's occupation, several hours anyway. So there are some ideas that it could be require people to keep moving or whatever, and I just don't think that accommodates the right that people have. I was also asked one time when I was the Portsmouth prosecutor to prosecute a case for Tiverton. They had reasons that they felt they couldn't handle it. And basically, though, it wasn't really a shoreline dispute. It was a dispute between two people who both thought their rights were being infringed upon. And I can understand why people might get testy when they think their rights are being infringed upon. The purpose, and I believe this succeeds in this purpose, is to define that so people don't actually have to fight each other, but will actually have a solid basis upon which to say, this is where I have a right to go, and this is where I do not have a right to go. And with that, Mr. President, I understand there are some folks here who may want to discuss this. I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Lemay.
Madam Clerk, was that short enough? Thank you.
Okay. I do know that there are some folks here that wish to speak on this. So I do want to hear from the citizens and then.
Mr. Aguirre, if I can ask
Sure.
Representative Portman, who's sponsor, a quick question. Thank you.
That was rather ungallant of me. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton,
Sorry.
for recognizing the sponsor.
I think one of the, and I've read through the bill and went back and read through the legalese of the Constitution. I think one of the main concerns that I've heard over the past week or so is it doesn't really delineate where the access comes from, which should be a public right of way. But it's in your bill or in the wording of the bill, obviously legislative council writes it, not you specifically, but if that bill could be changed somehow to say, I can't walk across Mr. Gleason's yard to get to the beach, to get to that high tide line, I think it would be more palatable to people.
There is an exclusion to be above the vegetation line.
Understood, but
And the bills does clearly, our study commission was specifically about lateral access. And I think that's even in the title of the bill, lateral access. So, and it is assumed that people would gain that lateral access from a legal right of way. But I will take that
I understand that
comment
it's
under
assumed.
advisement.
I'm thinking of two groups of
Mhm.
people here, or three
Yes.
groups of people. One, the fishermen who want to get the access, because I agree, I love to go fishing too. The people who own the properties
Mhm.
and Chief Peters' staff who
Right,
have to go out there and enforce it.
right.
And if we can strengthen the bill a little bit by saying access by a public right of way. On the west side, if you go down and park at Pheasant Hill,
Mhm.
I've done it, not park, but
Yes,
I've walked all the way down past.
I've
Baker
walked
and
that
all the
way
down.
too.
You
Yes.
gotta do it at low tide,
Mhm.
but it's doable. Where it says you can park at a public right of way. I think it delineates pretty well about the seawalls and hopefully people aren't walking up on other people's property, but
That, it doesn't allow for that.
right, I know it doesn't,
Okay.
but I think there's enough wiggle room in the law that one person can say it does and one person says it doesn't. And if we could tighten that up, it would make it a
I'll
little bit
take
more
that.
palatable.
I will take that
That's all.
back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions while I'm standing here?
Not yet, but
Okay,
we may need, we may.
be right
we may
over there.
need- We may need you back.
It's fine.
Okay. Now we've got some folks, so if you could just, again, when you come, name and address.
Good evening, I'm Abigail Brown. I live at 104 Bayview Avenue, Portsmouth. I'm here before you tonight as the head of the Harbor Commission and also head of the Portsmouth Town Rights of Way. On the 1st of March, we had a vote after the discussion of the bill that we feel as a Harbor Commission that we cannot accept the bill the way it's written. It doesn't protect our people of our town. And as Portsmouth has most of the coastline of the state of Rhode Island, I think the bill needs to be looked at very seriously. And this is not me, this is the Harbor Commission. Also, it was discussed that the town of Portsmouth has in its own right, it has 52 regular rights of way, which are town rights of way. There are 24 CRMC approved, 6 of which I just got done this year. 6 more I have up for approval from CRMC next year, and we have 9 on Prudence Island. So it is our hope that you will take our discussion under advisement. And as it is, please do not accept the Charlestown Council's resolution. We appreciate your time. Anyone have a question for me?
Yep.
Are you talking about the shoreline traversing? Or are you talking about Mr. McNamara, Representative McNamara's bill about identifying new rights of way, giving the authority to the DEM?
The Harbor Commission is talking about both ways.
Both.
Yes, because we have a lot of people in the town of Portsmouth who, if the high tide mark is raised to 6 feet, even not what they asked for 10, that virtually people will be in their front yards. It's a problem. Thank you.
Oh, everybody can come up just one at a time. Yeah.
My name is Don Grassi. I'm accompanied by my wife, Susan. We live at 17 Mount View Road, the end of Anthony Road. It's the cul-de-sac. We are right on the beach, and I agree with Abby about this. I got her letter in the mail. She misprinted the bill number, so I couldn't find it or read it, but she explained it to me. And I'm here to talk about the 6-foot rise. I'm not sure why that is required or desired. I mean, we have fishermen that go out to the point in great numbers and quite often. I'm okay with it. I don't have a problem with it. We have a good right of way at the end of Common Fence Point, down at the end of the cul-de-sac. In fact, Marshall Hill and I have cleaned that up and got some signs posted. And some people are quite upset about the trash that is behind there. I don't know if you've ever been out there, sir. So you've been on Common Fence Point on the rock outcrop? Okay.
I have to go down to the free and go all the way around.
Okay, well, if you've been there in the summer, then you've seen the beer cans, the trash. It's horrific.
I can go to my front yard and see the beer.
Well, that's true.
I live on Park Avenue, so what are you gonna do?
Right, well, there's beer cans and trash on the beach that I'm assuming are being thrown off of boats, which we can't in any way police. But these beer cans and trash are literally piled neatly on the rocks and instead of being carried back. I frequently will offer trash bags to fishermen going down there. Several years ago, somebody put a trash barrel on the pathway to the rocks. And within 2 days, it was filled and overflowing, and there was a ring 5 feet wide on every side, which I cleaned up, but I took the trash barrel with me. Because I don't know who did that, but whoever it was wasn't.
They often put a trash bag across the flow.
Well,
And it gets filled up very promptly.
Right.
And there is a problem of who's responsible after it gets filled up.
well, I took it upon myself. And took the trash barrel with me so it wouldn't happen again.
Yes.
My point is that Abby is 100% correct. My property is unique in that I have a patio on the back of my house that is raised 5 feet above the lower lawn, which I don't own. It's state land. Because the property out there, the back of my house, I own 4 feet to the property line. And then there's the 10-foot common fence point barrier that has been deeded in perpetuity. And then beyond that, to mean high tide is state land. So I have a lawn down there that I maintain. I feed it, I water it, it's pretty. And my grandson loves to play ball on it. And if this water line mark was to move up 6 feet above mean high tide, it would be at the bottom of my seawall, perhaps up a step or two in the concrete staircase that's inside the patio footprint. That they would, literally be halfway up to my patio. And I'm concerned about somebody perhaps getting injured and holding me responsible. I'm not a lawyer, but I know a lot of lawyers.
So this is where I bring Representative Corcoran back up to explain this part, because the way I read the bill, if you have a seawall, that 6-foot mark stops at that seawall.
Right.
Even if it makes it up over the seawall.
Right.
Somebody can't walk up over your seawall and on your lawn.
Well, the
Because the tide
seawall,
has gone up.
well, the lawn is on the other side, is at the bottom of the seawall. But the lawn isn't above the seawall. That's a patio. And then down, there's an internal staircase on the footprint of this patio. As you go down the wall side, it gets steeper. 6 feet would come up, maybe a step into that.
Based on just to clarify, based on the wording of the ordinance, they're not allowed to cross on anything that's man-made, like if there's a seawall,
Okay,
a lawn. This is really only to pass on wet, dry sand or a rocky beach. So they're not a.
so,
If we're gonna ask questions, you're gonna have to come up because I can't have people counting. So I'll be happy to try and answer questions one at a time. But I do understand that there is a lot of confusion because it does say 6 feet landward of
mean high
of the-
tide.
Well, of the definable, or they use the different words here, the residue line, but in any event, if there's vegetation, they can't cross it. If there's a seawall, they
okay.
cannot cross it. If there's anything else, a fence, they're not, the ordinance, the way it's written is wet or dry sand or rocky beach. Now, I think, obviously everybody can argue about what a rocky beach is.
It's rocky out there.
No, I understand, but I think there's a difference between, what I'm getting at is I think there's difference between a rocky beach that you can walk on versus a rocky beach that's got a 15-foot 1-to-1 slope,
Yeah.
which is used to armor and protect the slope. I wouldn't
Right.
consider that a rocky
Right.
beach. But I would consider something that's flatter with some rocks on it, something that would be considered a rocky beach.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so and I'm just trying to be fair. I've lived here most of my entire life and I've been all around the island and have enjoyed walking the beaches. And I do know that there isn't really, I don't think there's anybody in this room that could go out there and tell you exactly where the mean high tide line is.
Well,
Right.
I mean, I think there was some discussion about that, but
We're gonna
You
do it
know,
one at a time, folks.
I'm pretty, I mean, there's a wash up of seagrass that is usually, you know, within this much range.
Right.
So it's somewhere in there. And that's I don't care, you know, I mean, and I have people walk above that, people fish above that at high tide. I have never gone out to my beach or out to the rocks and told people to get off, move along. You're violating your right of way.
I appreciate that.
You know,
I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just trying to provide clarification that 6 feet does not entitle them to cross upon a vegetated grass area.
Yeah,
Does not
okay.
entitle them to walk up on steps, an
Okay.
abutment, or any of that nature.
So I have a pathway cut through the vegetation that was pre-existing before I bought the cottage and built my house. And, you know, I bring up the seashells and put a pathway down there. So, but at the end of that, where the vegetation barrier stops on my side of it, is where that lawn is.
And I think it would be reasonable to assume that if you had your pathway and it went to the edge of the grass, that's really what would be the
Yeah.
boundary line, so
Yeah,
to speak.
that's fine.
And again, I think Ms. Lebeck pointed out, this isn't perfect.
Mhm.
And it can probably be discussed one way or the other. I think what I just want to hear comments tonight.
Mhm.
And I want to give everybody that opportunity. And I also would just want to make sure that we're clear about what the ordinance is, what at least our understanding of the ordinance is and isn't before we
Right.
decide to do anything.
Sounds fair. Thank you.
And just for clarification, it's a state law, not a town ordinance.
What?
That we're debating.
Yeah.
We're
it's-
debating whether or not to
Yeah.
approve a
state-
resolution.
Yeah. This
For a
is
bill text that
Right.
would become state law. It's not a
State
town
law.
ordinance.
state law.
Just
Yes.
Good evening. My name's Paul Lorenzo, and I live at 148 Thayer Drive, Portsmouth. And I have a couple of points on this bill, more than a couple. The first of which it is a land taking. My property, my deed states that I own the property that you tax me on to the mean high tide line. At the very least, this is taking 6 feet of my property that I pay taxes on. Presently, not presently, for the 22 years I've lived there, people access through my property. I don't have a problem with it. I kind of ignore it. They go through the railroad tracks and then cut through it. It doesn't bother me at all. I do have liability problems with that, and my insurance company has asked me to put up no trespassing signs. They're commonly destroyed by whoever walks through there and thinks they have the right to do that, but I need to keep them because I insure the property, and I have quite a bit of liability if someone gets hurt there. Part of the liability, I'm looking at this bill. Terry Quatrevan doesn't think there's any liability. Oh, I'm protected by the state's limited liability clause. And last time I checked into that or heard about that, it's $100,000. That means nothing. My property is insured for millions. My personal liability is insured for that, and I don't need the additional exposure or insurance rates. And I probably should be getting a tax assessor abatement based upon this land taking as well. Mean high tides have a legal definition. That's why they chose them. They have a scientific definition. You can go look at them, see what the mean high tide was for that year, and you can see it. My property, you can see it with the seaweed line anyway. You can see, even if it's the highest point, it doesn't matter. My property isn't traversable past that high tide line because it goes up a steep embankment and it's fully wooded. There is a path there that's been there. The deer use it. Everyone uses it. But I still don't want to have my property taken, and I don't feel like having an argument with people who feel the need to be, oh, I can camp out on your property. In fact, I can take your windsurfer. I can do this and that. I've had quite a bit of vandalism down there. I've never called the police about it. I just take it at stride. But if this is a land taking, That's one major point. There's no defining that this isn't, and Terry's here, right? Likes to define that, oh, that's okay to take a land taking because that's part of the rights of access based in an 1863 constitutional amendment, further ratified somewhat, and I guess 1986. I haven't been studying yet, but it's all wishy-washy. The thing that really gets my eye here, conversing about this with Terry, is she mentioned, it's really not an issue here in Portsmouth. It is an issue in Charleston and some of the other beach fronts where people use the beach and they can't traverse the property. Traverse it, and there's a problem there. So we'll give them an extra 6 feet and take that owner's property, even though it's a moving property line. I understand it is a moving property line. But why would you be taking it? You are taking it. So Terry Quatrevan represents District 72. This town council here is the town council in Portsmouth, right? Not in Charleston. This is Portsmouth, right? I would expect my representative to be representing the citizens of District 72. I know if I have a federal problem, I give Jack Reed's office a call. They take care of it. They do anything they can to help me. In this particular case, that's not so. Terry Quatrevan is not representing District 72 in this instance. And if she is, she'll have to tell me who it is that she's representing. I mean, so those are my major issues with this, and it is a land taking. And I can see it being fought, but just for that reason, it is a land taking. It isn't someone's interpretation of a constitutional vague written thing in 1863 and re-upped in 1986. I'll have to ask Terry, the expert on this.
That was the last constitutional.
Yeah, well, that's pretty great. Mean high tide is concrete. I can find I can call a surveyor. He can determine what the mean high tide line is. I know it moves, but it's concrete. I can tell you what it is for that year. No matter how you look at it, look, I'm not interested in arguing about this with you. I'm more concerned with the statewide bill, but I don't think we should be in this town represent the folks in Portsmouth, not the folks in Charleston. I'd appreciate your support in the matter, and I'd also appreciate the support of my representative in this matter, because she represents, again, District 72. That's all I really have to say.
Could I just- I'm just going to address a couple of points that were made, one of which maybe my good friend Attorney DeAndrea might disagree with me on. The person who transferred you land cannot transfer any more than that person had. And Rhode Island does not allow you to get land that is under the high water mark. It just doesn't. Your land never got to there. Nobody is taking your land away from you, sir. I don't care what the deed says.
All right, okay, all right.
Really interested in arguing with you on the legal definition, but I've been dealing with real estate for a long time. My deed, if you go look it up, and any other deed in the state of Rhode Island, you should probably consult an attorney on this. Defines the property line as the mean high tide line, period. Concrete, I'm an engineer. That's black and white, that's black and white. It isn't a
Sir,
moving
I was a
tide.
lawyer in this state since 1981.
Well, then you should.
All right,
you should-
okay, all right, gentlemen.
You should know the definition of my deed then.
I do.
Okay, so that's not an
Secondarily,
argument
well,
point. But my questions.
All right, I don't really want to get into an argument. I just want to make a couple of points.
Yeah, the questions that I have, I'd really appreciated if Terry Quatrevan, our representative, I think, would answer them.
Representative Corcoran is a state representative from District 92 or
It's
whatever.
72, I know who it is,
All
but
right.
you're here to endorse a bill or whatever it is we're here for tonight, that's presented by my representative. You represent District 72, which a portion of it is in Portsmouth. I'd like to hear from Terry which one of her constituents she's representing in this bill. I don't know of any. I don't see any out here.
Can I tell you one thing, sir? If this law is passed, it will affect the entire state of Rhode Island.
Okay.
Not just the
All right.
town of Portsmouth.
All right.
All right, I don't, this, here's another, one final point that I have on this. This doesn't affect the entire state of Rhode Island or landowners that are on the water. It's targeting certain individuals that own property. I mean, why doesn't this include 6 feet at the marina? There's the mean high tide line at the dock, 6 feet in, go fishing there, right? Why not? Same thing, it's the same thing. This only affects private landowners. What other land, you think it affects every landowner that owns waterfront property?
It affects
Does it affect
statewide, and
Portsmouth
I'm not
Abbey?
sure of the law with regard to marina. I am not. I will give you that.
Well, you should read it because it says man-made features are exempt from it before commenting on it. I'd suggest you read it. But perhaps Terry could answer, she's asking for this resolution or whatever it is she's asking for. Perhaps you can answer a couple of these questions. Thank you.
The item is before the council. I mean, if Rep. Cortravin wants to answer.
The only thing I want to say is that I did not ask for this resolution. I want to make that abundantly clear. I want to make that abundantly clear. I did.
Well, okay, folks.
I-
Please, we're not going to yell from the crowd, please. I would
Can
let,
clarify that for a second,
hold on,
Mr.
Mr.
President?
Levesque, hold on, let me finish. I will let everybody come up and speak, but it's hard when people yell from the audience, and I just want to keep control of the meeting.
Mhm.
And we'll we'll let everybody speak. We won't cut anybody off. You can clearly say what you need to say, and if there's a response, we can respond. I just want it to be orderly, and because we're going to get off track real quick. And so I want to hear what folks have to say.
Hi,
Well, hold on one second, because I
Okay.
believe Mr.
I
Levesque
just
was
want to
going to
acknowledge
finish.
that Representative Corcoran did not ask for this to be here. I noticed it on the consent agenda, I guess, 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to bring it forth. So it was entirely upon my volition.
Amanda Carr, Baker Road, Portsmouth. How's everybody? So I've been living in Rhode Island for 51 years. I've never lived on the water before until I lived here. And I've never had trouble accessing the bay or any of the beaches. I absolutely understand the issues they're having in South County. We've got some out-of-state summer homeowners who think they own the beach, who think they own the water, that are hired private security to keep people from a right that we've had forever. I've understood this since I was 7 years old. Mean high tide. You stay below it. That's it. It's as simple as that. Global warming. When global warming raises the sea level, the mean high tide level will rise. My property ends at the mean high tide. Period. Why does it need to be 6 feet further than that? I'm not done. That is my property and it is being seized. I have people fishing, walking, people from out of state, clamming in front of my yard all the time. No problem, right? And I don't know about anybody else in here, but I've been caught on the beach by high tide, not paying attention. And I gotta wade my way through till I find a public access place where I can get up. Now, do I have people do that and come up my yard? There's a boat ramp there and my neighbor has. They think they can walk through it. And I have people that transverse my backyard and I'll say stuff to them because that's my backyard. And I don't walk into other people's backyards. I don't go up to Sprague Street and walk through somebody's backyard because I want to go to the public high school. Right? I go on public ways. And so the problem I'm having is that 6 foot. Mean high tide's mean high tide. And I don't think that our chief of police or any police officers want to come down on a regular basis and try to decide what 6 feet is. I don't have a seawall. I have, what do you call it, Deb? Rip wrap. It's a rocky, wet area, right? So I guess they can walk on that, although they're gonna slide. And right above that is my grass. But I don't know, if I was a cop getting in the middle, I wouldn't want to get into a dispute between two people. And I certainly don't want to be calling the police about this stuff. But 6 feet, say it's high tide, say it's a full moon and it's high tide. And I got somebody walking through my backyard. If I was a police officer and I came down there and this person on the beach said, hey, that's high tide, and I am 5 feet over it. You know, you're going to leave that to a police officer that has a lot of better things to do to decide. To me, that's more confusing than mean high tide. I don't think there's anybody in this state that lives here that goes up in the water that's ever been around the water that doesn't understand where the mean high tide line is. And yeah, 6 feet of land times whatever, 40 feet, you can take that off my taxes. You can, and I mean, the minute you pass this, I am insulted that my representatives, all of you, Michelle, Carrie, I emailed you all, Linda, have made a decision on this bill prior to checking in with your constituents that voted you into office. We matter. You're not there to represent Charleston, like the gentleman said, or the state. You're here to represent us. So I would suggest that you get a census on what the people in this town want before you have already made the decision. I got dismissed in the emails. It's a good idea. And you just used the word assume when you came up here. I would assume that this bill, I'm not doing this on assume. Everybody has a right to public access to the water, to the beaches. It's a beautiful state. We should all be able to go in the water. We should all be able to fish the shore. We should also clean up our lines, our nets, so we're not destroying the fish. The gentleman's right. It's a pigsty out there. We got people camping, having lunch on the seawalls and leaving their trash all over. They're coming down from Fall River to fish. You know, I just tell them, you know, this is closed to clamming. So the DEM in that area was, but you know, let's be reasonable. Let's have a conversation, and please don't make a decision until you know what your constituents want.
Andre, Mr. Yandra.
Good evening. My name is Donato Andre DeAndrea. I confess that I am a Newport resident, but I own real estate on Baker Road in Portsmouth. It has been in the family, I believe, since 1959. And it is always has been family occupied. I have been recognized by both the Superior Court and the Coastal Resources Management Council as an expert in the area of real estate controversies, and have provided testimony before both of those boards. The legislation as drafted, and let me also, another aside, I don't think my land in Portsmouth is going to be affected by this. We have a seawall and a boat ramp. So I'm not really overly concerned about that. But the legislation, by moving where the mean high tide is, and that's where the property line is, constitutes a taking of land, for which the landowner has to be compensated. I'm not one to discourage litigation. So, you know, I may find something to occupy me in my dotage. I don't know. In addition to the question of the value of the land taken from the mean high tide into this 6 feet beyond where the water ends, is the concept of severance damages. That if you have some of your land taken for a public purpose, and that negatively impacts the value of the rest of that piece of property, you are to be compensated for the loss, that loss of value also. Been involved in the little of those cases. That's called severance damages. I'm a little mystified, and I really don't care technically how the Greek philosopher scientist Meton, who created the metonic cycle, which tells us where being high tide is, was able to do so. It's a 17.2 year cycle, as I recall. That's how long he had to sit by the water, doing other things, but watching the sea. With all the satellite that we have and all the other scientific improvements, I would think we'd be able to find that with more ease and maybe even have some way of marking it. But I think as a practical matter, and again, doesn't impact me personally as far as I know. It may impact my law practice if I continue to be allowed to testify before the Coastal Resources Management Council and in Superior Court. But I think there are some things to be considered here. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre.
I do like how the council members were looking down at their phones during that. Amazing.
Come on up. And I know I know that this can be emotional, but please do not yell from the audience. I know, but it's a distraction.
I
And
understand that. I apologize, but when I see people looking down at their phones while somebody's speaking, that's kind of disrespectful. I'm not yelling out to the audience. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just being honest.
but please, let's, thank you.
Okay, for nothing.
My name is Larry Walsh at 2 Bayview Avenue, right next to Mount Hope Park. And Mr. Levesque, just so you know, over 1,000 years, the first codification of this type of law was done. The first codification of this particular type of law was done in Turkey over 1,000 years ago. So it's been around for a long time. And people still don't understand it after 1,000 years. But anyway, just so you know, and I can explain the Metonic year if somebody's interested, but I don't want to repeat what everybody else said because they are a lot more eloquent than I am. But I would like to have the council know that 2 members of this committee have admitted, and it's been reported in the paper, that the decisions are based on the ocean-facing beaches, and that they recognize that the characteristics in the Upper Bay are totally different than the characteristics in the ocean-facing beaches. So I'm not sure why the town of Portsmouth, who's in the Upper Bay, would want a law passed that's really based on 40 miles of beachfront, when there's another 360 miles of waterfront that's going to be affected. So I think we should listen to the committee members who say that, you know, they're not really representing the Upper Bay. The other thing is where I live, people come down, and I believe in access to the water, but I also believe in my right for the quiet enjoyment of my home. But right in front of my house, people will be smoking cigars and cigarettes and playing loud music, and that's not enjoyable. And then when I ask them to not smoke or play loud music, they say, oh, this is public, I can do whatever I want. So I think this will just give people an implied right that they may not understand, but they're going to take advantage of that and just do whatever they want. So I really suggest that, or I recommend that the council does not approve or give approval for this resolution.
Come on up.
Bob Wilson, 735 Black Point Lane, Portsmouth. I will also admit not to being a full-time resident. We've been coming here for 25 years. Aquidneck Island is a dream come true for us. Last 11 years, we've had a property here and it's the best times of our lives. Thank you for everyone for making this such a great place to be. I sent a letter last week and our clerk mentioned to me that the process is that doesn't get put into the record. You all have it, I know, but I know it's not an open hearing, but there's a lot here. There's a lot of emotion out there. More facts I think are helpful. We might want to make an exception for people who have put comments in since the agenda was published to be published in the record. So I would ask the council just to take that under advisement.
I mean, if there's something that you specifically want to put on the record.
It's the letter that I sent last week.
Entire letter. Okay. Yeah.
It's there.
Well,
Okay, so
it's not in the backup.
I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you for your service. I actually like to thank Terry for her service as well. I know these are tough jobs and lots of competing, points of view. She was kind enough to take my call last year when this first came up. We agreed we weren't going to agree on this pretty quickly, but she was still very cordial. And I have to say, I appreciate that. Did write in opposition to both bills. I know tonight we're only considering the House bill, and I would urge you not to support the Charlestown Council's resolution on these pending bills. And I'd urge you, please become active in the legislative process. We have the largest amount of coastline here in Rhode Island. We have a lot of vested interest in how this goes forward, and we need your leadership. Unfortunately, I think each bill has the potential of adding significant burdens on the town. And I oppose the bills as drafted on several grounds. I hope you will as well as you learn more. We have a lot of coastline, but my first question is, do we have a lot of cases where we have, disputes, alleged trespass and whatnot? I asked Terry about that. She also commented most of the issues went to the ocean facing beaches. There's the famous case of the person with the seaweed. I read an article this week in the Providence Journal that turns out that person brought a federal lawsuit against Kingstown. Kingstown looked at it and said, geez, we think we acted improperly. The officers probably shouldn't have arrested him for trespass. And the upshot is he was paid $25,000 out of some sort of a fund as a settlement. So it turns out even the most famous case of trespass probably, wasn't handled right. And I'm not sure that's what's driving this bill, but I find that an interesting fact. So love to know what our actual experiences are in Portsmouth. Do we have a problem? It seems like we should know that before we make any radical changes. These could be costly, as some of the speakers have mentioned, and it would be great to know if other towns around the state have this problem, because I think these burdens could become pretty onerous as time goes on. I too am not a lawyer, and however, when I read what's out there in the Constitution and some of the other publications, I think it's a taking. Others don't think it's a taking. I know many of the representatives who testified last year said they didn't think it was a taking, but I can tell you we already have a number of out-of-state law firms who've lined up on this, and at least one local firm is lining up on this. It's going to cost us a lot of money to find out whether it's a taking or not. And it just seems to me we have better uses for our resources. I think third, Portsmouth, as has been mentioned, we have a great place, but we also have some of the most valuable property around the water. And that's fine. We all pay those taxes. But if we do, start messing with this line, we're putting either those taxes at risk, or potentially we're going to shift that tax burden to other taxpayers, because that seems to be the way the tax works. So I think the shifting of tax burden could impact people who are not in front of the water. And I'm not sure that's really been thought about. Maybe it has, but it hasn't been discussed. If we in fact do have a significant set of issues or trespass disputes, and a modification is required to make this more clear, there are other alternatives. I think the two definitions in the two bills, I think, leave a lot to be desired. For instance, this idea of the rack line or the mean high water line. which tide. If you go down to our beaches, you take a picture 3 or 4 different days, that line's moving all around, seems to me, and the seaweed's still there. So seems to me you're going to have more disputes, not less, if you use something like that. The mean high water definition, by the way, it is, I didn't know it went back to Turkey, but it's an interesting problem. But, we have a map. The Coastal Resource Management Council, very detailed, shows you what's happened since 1939. They very quickly came out after people were pointing this out in the hearing saying that's not what it was intended to do. But I'm sure with a little bit of effort and some resource, we could figure out a way to come up with an app that would tell you pretty quickly where the mean high water is. It wouldn't be something you could do tomorrow, but I think over the course of a year, it could be done. It wouldn't be impossible. So I think that's something to think about. And also Tom Grieve, who, many people, most of you know, suggested to the commission last year to the hearings, a simple idea. Why not just say, we know where the water is. We may not know where the mean high water is. Well, why don't we just say there's a hold harmless or something? We'll let people sit or walk along the water within a few feet. That would seem to be, if we have a problem, I'm not sure we do, a simpler solution. I am concerned about legislative overreach and the precedent that these bills could, in fact, provide for taking even more valuable private lands. And that is just, again, a slippery slope that we don't want to get into. And there's another issue which no one seems to have raised yet. If we do move these boundaries closer, well, guess what? We're going to give the Coastal Resource Management Council a whole bunch more land that they're going to have to manage. They have the 200 feet from the existing mean high water. If we move that closer to private land, that's a whole bunch of additional regulation and oversight that they'll have to provide. Having worked with them, actually, they're better than most of these sorts of agencies. They're very understaffed. They don't have the resources to deal with what they already have. There's going to be a bunch of new people that come into this. It's going to slow things down at best. I think that's a resource issue we need to consider. So those are just some of the points. I'm sure there are others, but we need your help and urge you, certainly at this juncture, until we know a lot more, please don't support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask the police chief, or actually Mr. Reno. We get reports of activities of our police department on periodic basis. I'm sorry. We do get reports of activity of the police department on a periodic basis. It could just be my recollection, but I don't recollect seeing a whole lot of instances of dispute of someone being on someone's property versus on the public right of way. The police had to mitigate. I'm not talking about access trespassing across to get to the shore. I'm talking about what this bill does, which says where mean high tide or high tide or what have you is. Is that a common, or how many of those do you have to deal with?
I'll let
Which I
Chief speak
believe
to the
was-
specifics,
yeah.
but yes, I mean, during the season, we do get lots of complaints. I don't think they're necessarily tied to what you're bringing up here right now. Most of our complaints are garbage, campfires, quite frankly, human refuse, and loud music.
I concur with what Mr. Rain is saying. The issues that we do see in regards to this topic, I think would be addressed by Mr. Hamilton's comments, because most of the issues is how do the people get to that location? Most of the disputes that we go down to, people aren't upset that they're at that location and on the water. It is how they get there. They're crossing their property. There's no right of way in any sort of close proximity, yet they're there. Or they're encroaching upon and they're just moving further up towards their property. So most of the issues would be resolved if something like Mr. Hamilton has suggested earlier would be added.
Which isn't related to the bill in front of us, right? Yes. Well,
I think it would enhance the bill that's in front of us if they clarify that I can't walk across your yard to get to the high tide.
sure. Understood. But I just want to make sure I understand your answer to the question.
which is people doing bad things and refuse and fires, maybe what have you. I don't know that if they're doing that 6 feet closer or farther, that you won't still be called, and it's still gonna be a problem, because people should not be doing those things. My question is specifically on a where's the line and you're over the line dispute. Does that come up? And if so, how often?
Comes up seasonal, but I wouldn't say that that's the major problem that we deal with. I'd
The
say-
problem is I'm gathering.
Yes, yep.
People behaving badly rather than
Yes.
trespassing or encroaching.
Yes, sir.
Not that that doesn't happen.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, and I could just add, because I know that there's going to be people listening to this that are gonna say that we discounted their concerns. There are properties in town that do get trespassed on quite regularly, whether you have this bill or not. We're aware of where they are, and it is a constant struggle. Not many, as I said, about 90% of our complaints have to do with noise, refuse, garbage, things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. And that was the point I'm trying to understand, which is that, as you just said, Mr. Rayner, whether we have this bill or not, these types of problems will still be issues that we will need to police.
Yes, we're a victim of our own geography, yes.
Thank you.
How you doing? This is the Dave Reese, 66 Freeborn Street. This was touched on before by somebody else. And the vision appraisal, property appraiser is here now in town, and we all have an opportunity to meet with him. And so I ran this by him as far as, he said basically it takes away a deeded property rights on linear frontage. But he said the most interesting thing, it provides an easement on their property. And that actually detracts from the value of the property that the town's gonna get, so. And he gave me an example. He said, if somebody's got a 200-foot linear frontage to a 6-foot depth that they now have an easement on, that's 1,200 square feet. Now, right now, the rate in town, it's $61.97, let's say $62. That amounts to $74,400 of value in question. Now, he said then, because that has an easement on it, it can't be taxed at the full amount. So that means the town is gonna, there's a factor that you put in, and I didn't know what that was. But it's gonna reduce the amount of taxes that the town's gonna get from each piece of waterfront property when you classify each one as having an easement. And if property owners know this, they can go in and request that. So that's all I wanted to say, was that this is gonna shift taxes to the other people to keep the tax base the same. Because now the waterfront people won't be paying as much.
Mr. President, may I? Another proud member of the class of 72. David, I realize that Vision Appraisal is in the business of assessing the property in the town, but they are not lawyers. All right. The fact is that the law says that the people have a right of access.
I didn't say that. I'm saying the money that they're gonna, we're talking
They're not
passing
going to
money,
get-
not the rights.
Money is not going to change hands at all, David.
No,
Not at all.
no, we're not
Certainly
even
on
listening.
Freeport
They're
Street.
not changing, no dollars are changing, but the value of the property is gonna go down because there's an easement in it. That was his
It's not
take.
an easement. That's a legal technical term. This is the right of way. It is not an easement. If in fact you.
Wait a minute,
give
now you're
somebody-
talking about giving them a right of way. Now that is a right.
If you give somebody a right of way over your property, that may be an easement, okay? But the access to the shoreline is not an easement. And it cannot be detracted from your property value. It cannot. Trust me on this one, David.
So you don't have to trust me. I'm just telling you that the person
I'm
that's
asking you to
that's
trust
setting
me.
that's setting our tax rates.
All right, we're gonna,
You know, but-
I understand your point, Mr. Reese.
But it's something to consider, that the town should consider, that maybe somebody will find a way to do that.
No, I guess it, I think I understand some of the comments. And I don't know if this has been vetted, and Terry, I don't want to put you on the spot. The issue we've heard tonight that there's, Mr. DeAndrea made the comment, he's an attorney, he's been an attorney for a long time. I respect Mr. DeAndrea's opinion. Is it a taking? Is it was there discussions when this was going through the process?
Oh,
Is it considered a taking?
There were a lot of discussions about that and very different opinions, but this bill came out of a House Study Commission that the speaker asked me to chair. I got interested in this issue more about sea level rise, and then I read the Constitution. I got interested in the history. Speaker said, why don't you have a study commission? There were a multitude. We had experts from across the state, some sitting on the committee and some that came in and testified. This was overwhelmingly supported, unanimously supported by the members of the commission, the bill, and it was actually 10 feet. Then it went to Judiciary Committee and it came down to 6 feet. And then it was unanimously passed by the House. So that's kind of how the bill traveled. The discussion about takings came up in the hearing. The discussion came up throughout the study commission, but people don't think the majority of the legal, and we had lawyers sitting on the commission, did not think it would be a taking. But, you know, we may find that out.
No,
And they were looking at the Rhode Island Constitution. And that was really, because the Rhode Island Section 16 actually says compensation for taking a private property for public use, regulation of fishery rights and shoreline privileges, not a public taking. So, the Constitution says it's not, our state constitution. And I'm trying to think, there was a couple other, I never in any of the testimony did that $100,000 come up on the liability, the state liability. I will have to check on that. I never heard that. But we can find out about that. And I'm trying to think if there were any other unanswered or questions that were mentioned that I should respond to.
Section 32(6)(3) doesn't mention a dollar figure.
It does not mention a dollar amount. It does not. And I never heard that $100,000 limit. And there are members of my constituency and obviously across the state that don't live on the shore that do like this bill and want and support this bill, people in Portsmouth and people outside of, I know we heard from the property owners tonight.
All right.
And I think what Councilman Hamilton talked about, making a statement about legally accessing the shore. I will bring that back to, and I know what I wanted to say. This bill has not been heard yet. So the people in the audience are welcome to, at the time that it's heard again before judiciary, which it will be, they would be welcome to come up and testify.
Thank you.
Can you just say, sorry, Terry, can you just say for those who may not know how to look for when that's going to happen at judiciary?
You would go to Bill Tracker, you would set up an account, you would put in H5147 and any other bills you're interested in, and then you should get an email when the hearing is scheduled. You don't get a lot of notice. We don't find out until Friday afternoon what the hearings are going to be for the following week. And they have been having trouble with Bill Tracker this year, but I've been told that it was fixed last week. So we'll see. Because I depend on it as well.
Just for clarification, 5174. Yeah.
5174,
You said
yes.
47.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, you're looking at it. I wasn't looking at it. Thank you. 5174. And the other one, I think some of the emails had it incorrectly. I think the one that other people were concerned about was Chairman McNamara's bill. And I think that's 5116, but in some of the emails, people had that one 5166, but I think it's 5116.
5147 is not even
Sorry about that.
relating to assisted living
Thank you.
residences.
5174, 5174.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, we'll keep it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right,
We still have some comments, so
okay.
don't go far. Mr. Green.
Tom Grieb, 110 Thayer Drive. Terry is absolutely right that the commission, you unanimously did not think this was a taking. As Terry knows, I went to very many of her hearings. That does not include the lawyers that testified at the committee, many of whom did think this was a taking. So it is an unsettled thing. It's curious to me that nobody's asked the Supreme Court for an advisory opinion and why they wouldn't do that. The problems, which I will call bad behavior, that we find, at least in Portsmouth here, will not be solved by this bill. The privileges of the shore are ill-defined. There are 4 of them: swimming, fishing, traversing, and collecting seaweed. It also says not limited to. If this bill defined things that were not allowed, such as fires, camping, staying overnight, drinking, those sorts of things, that would be a big help in solving what I think, having been on the Harbor Commission for now over a decade, is the real problem, at least in this town, which is bad behavior on the water. I'd like one other thing to discuss with you, and that is the line. The line is the seaweed or the rack line or the fine sand line. It's ill-defined, even in this bill. When she first proposed this bill, I sent Ms. Corcoran a picture of the shore near my house, and it showed several very well-defined rack, seaweed lines, and so forth, up to about 80 feet from the existing water line. Even she misinterpreted that. She took one of the seaweed lines and actually showed it in one of the House hearings, my picture, showing that that was where the last high tide line was. It was a good 25 feet from the last high tide line. And then to add 6 or 10 feet beyond that really distorts where the line actually is. There are 2 ways, I think, that if we really need, and I don't think we do, but if we really do need a line, there's 2 ways to do it. One is to take the water line that exists right now. If you're within 6 feet of that water line, and 6 feet is longer, is wider than a sidewalk, you've got transverse area. You can get by. There's no reason why you can't use the existing water line, which everybody can define very easily. The other one is, as Mr. Wilson showed, the CRMC puts out a shoreline map. They started in 1939 after the hurricane. There's another line in the 1970, and then another one, I think it's 2003. This shows the line in that year of the shoreline, and you can see which way it's going, how much it moves, and you would, in Portsmouth, you'd be shocked at how little it moves. That can be used on a cell phone. It's on a satellite map, so you can determine specific spots like rocks or trees or so forth. And you can very well define from that where the high water line is. It's not hard. It may not be survey okay, but certainly the rack line isn't either. It's what we have used in the Harbor Commission to solve disputes for at least the decade that I've been on it. And it works with people of good faith, it works. If you got the wild man that just thinks he could be able to go anywhere he wants, it's not going to work. But for anybody of good spirit, it works. These are the sorts of things we should be looking at. What's being proposed is not going to fix the problems, and it's going to cause even, I think, further ones. I ask you, please do not support the resolution for Charleston. Thank you.
Mr. Grieve left.
Hold on.
Okay, I actually read your letter. It was forwarded to me. And that is another method of figuring out where the tide is. And I don't disagree that is another method that could be used. I will point out that, I mean, I used to represent people. I remember representing a gentleman named Sandy. I can't think for the life of me his last name. But one of the big storms came up and took about a foot off of his frontage on the water. Okay? That happened, and I don't think CRMC is going to go down the next day and resolve that particular issue. Now, I believe that you can go along the line normally, and I don't know how 25 feet, because the tides don't, I believe, go up that much, but after a storm, I could see.
It was after a
Okay,
storm, which
after
is
a storm,
why
could
I
see that.
sent the picture to Ms. Portman, to show just how distorted a seaweed line can be.
Again, but it specifically mentioned in the legislation, we're not talking about that type of thing. We're talking about when you can go along and see a traditional kind of, tide line, either from seaweed accumulating, shells accumulating, something like that. And you can see where the wet sand is that indicates that previously there had been water there. So, I mean, I think that as to your comments about people acting badly, I agree with you. Almost everything I've heard is that people have taken advantage of the right of way, and I guess the neighbors who live there, by doing conduct that is bad. It's also, by and large, illegal. Trespassing across somebody's yard is illegal. Whether or not you're getting to a right that you have on the waterway, it's illegal. You can't do that. Okay. Having littering all over the beach, it's illegal. I'm not saying there's going to be a police officer down every day to look at it. So I do agree with you that some good faith between, and these folks I know, it's their property. They don't want, or it's that area. They don't want things like this happening. So it is probably incumbent upon the people who show up to show respect for the entire area. Okay. But those are different problems. Those are problems with people misbehaving as opposed to problems with people having a right to access the water.
You are correct, but those are the problems we deal with. We're not dealing with people not being able to have access to the water. We have 80+ rights of way to the water in Portsmouth. People get access to the water. It's the people acting badly that are the problem that is not being solved. And we're trying to solve a problem for Charleston, maybe. I don't even know. I'll go over there.
This is not really, this bill is not about access to the water. There is another bill that talks about access to the water. This presumes that you have gotten to the water.
That's the problem.
without violating
That's the
any
problem.
rights.
It presumes that you've gotten to the water
Well,
properly.
you have to basically
The
assume
bill
that-
should say only if you have gotten to the water over a legal right of way and you, whatever.
I don't know if that'd be a problem. I don't think that.
It certainly has been up to now. I'll tell you that. It has been up to now. We've been asking for that. We've been asking for further definitions of what the rights of, or the privileges of the shore are. We can't get that. We can't get
We're trying here. As you can see, it's not an easy thing to do. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? I will
it's a
tell
lot,
you that.
it's a lot easier than it's being made out to be.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
We should exchange our paperwork more often.
Nancy Green, 110 Thayer Drive. Please do not vote to support House Bill 5174 as written. I've read the entire bill. The bill starts out describing how confusing it is to find our way to the shoreline. Not a good start. The town of Portsmouth has over 80 rights of way to the shoreline. We've heard this before tonight. Most easily found. But nowhere in this bill does it require the people accessing the shoreline to do this on legal rights of way, not by trespassing on private property. That is one of the main concerns that we have had. We are neighbors with the Lorienzos. Mr. Lorenzo spoke here. We also have been told by our insurance company to put a no trespassing sign. But that's on our beach path. I get people walking up the beach path, through my yard, through my driveway, all the time. If we called the police every time someone passed on my property, my taxes would go up even more than the 4% that they're going to go up this year. This is 2023, and we now have wonderful handheld cell phones that with the touch of a button, we're able to find the rights of way and mean high water around the world, not just in Portsmouth. And I'm insulted that someone stated earlier that no one knows where mean high water is. I live with somebody who can tell you where mean high water is twice a day, every day, 365 days a year. H 5174 does not in words limit what enjoyment is allowed. Wild dogs, wild children, loud music, campfires, overnight camping, trash, sanitary facilities. I clean up our beach every week that I'm there. I clean it up all the time, and it is a mess from the people that go down there. We do not ask people to do anything except pick up their trash. And as a shoreline property owner, I'm of course concerned with liability, especially in this litigious society. No bill is able to stop people from suing. And we live on a rocky beach and people fall. My grandchildren have fallen and gotten hurt on our beach. But before voting tonight, I implore you councilors to read resident Bob Wilson's letter. Mr. Wilson is much more eloquent and succinct than I could hope to be. But please don't vote to support this bill as written.
All right. I just want to clarify one comment because I made the comment about mean high water. Mean high water is an elevation. It's a specific elevation. I don't think, unless you have survey equipment, you can go out there to any place and establish where mean high water is. An app on your phone is not going to do it. Mean high water, you can eyeball it. And that's my point was it's a specific elevation. And I know, Tom, you're going to get up and defend. I know. It's an elevation and it's only, you can establish it with survey grade equipment, a specific elevation to establish a line that is going to vary probably every day.
Yes, you can.
And it's going to vary every day.
Slightly. I mean,
But it's
talking-
not an exact line. That's all my point is.
Yeah, yes, you're
That's my
absolutely,
point.
you're
Okay,
absolutely
well,
correct.
And so if we're going to split hairs, that's all my point.
Okay,
is.
let me split the
Tom.
CRMC here.
I-
CRMC
Tom.
uses that line, their
I
line
know.
is where their area of auspices are, the 200
No,
feet.
It's
They're
200 feet from the coastal feature, not mean high water.
No, it's
It's
not.
200 feet from the coastal feature. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, so
If you're,
it's 200 feet from the coastal feature, not mean high
okay,
water.
not, okay, all right.
And
I
you know
stand, I
what?
stand corrected.
But so that means CRMC's coastal feature is the top of the bank, the top of the dune. It's actually,
Okay,
further in.
but it's the coastal feature that they use to measure high water. From.
absolutely, I don't disagree with that. I'm just
Okay.
saying mean high water varies every day. So I get it, but people's property
So
lines
does
are
the
tied to
coastal
the mean-
feature though.
It's not, it's a coastal feature, but it's not CRMC regulates from the top of the coastal feature. Mean high water, and I fully agree, people's rights are to their property line, which is mean high water. I fully understand it. I'm not disputing it. But I made a comment about mean high water that you couldn't just go out there and pick it out. And I stand by it. I stand by it. You can't go out there and tell me where mean high water is. You can have an idea.
Yes,
and it's
you're
plus or
absolutely
minus.
right, but you can, as a homeowner, you can have it surveyed, you can know where it is.
That
You-
day,
Well,
that day. It's an elevation. It's an elevation that will vary
Yes.
because why? The tides bring stuff in and bring stuff out, so the surface changes.
it,
All right, so we,
All right.
we don't have to go down that road. Trust me. Exactly.
So-
I fully agree with you. I fully agree. Please don't shout though, because I'm gonna fall to my own thing by talking to the audience. I'm just trying to keep it in order here. I'm not disagreeing, but people sometimes want to call me out for a comment I made. I just wanted to clarify my comment. That's all.
So
We
I
can
just
move on.
want to opine here. Mean high watermark refers to the watermark that is most commonly with the
No, that's
equal
the high water
amounts.
line. Mean high water is an elevation. It's an average elevation. We heard it. It's taken over an 18.6 year cycle. That's mean high water.
Okay.
It is. I have my moments.
Okay, hi, I'm Diana Willett. I live at 137 Muscle Bed Shoal Road. Sorry. Diana Willett, 137 Muscle Bed Shoal Road. If any of you are familiar with it, it's kind of a pretty much secluded area. And as a result, a lot of people, there's only 9 houses on the street. And there's only 5 of us that live there full time. So because it is kind of way out of the way, the public access to get to where I live is on Pheasant Lane. From Pheasant Lane to the Mount Hope Bridge, there's no public access. I live probably a mile from that public access. And people come all the way. It's a nice walk. It's wonderful. I have no objections to that. I think it's great. I talk to the people. It's fine. The problem, again, as people have already stated, is the behavior of a certain group of people. And there is, because I don't have neighbors that are there full time, people camp out, and I'm talking way past the 6 feet mark. They light fires and they stay there for I'm talking from 7 in the morning till 10, 11 at night. Okay, so when we define public access, we need to really define that, because that's not cool. All right, there are no facilities there. When you're there from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, there's a tree. Okay, when I look out my property at the beautiful ocean, there's a tree there. You know what tree I'm talking about. We call it the poop tree, because when people are there all day, you go around that tree, there's toilet paper everywhere. It's disgusting. I've taken pictures of it. And as we move forward, and this is happening now, forget about, passing a bill, this is happening now. My big concern is how you police that. I don't want to be calling the Portsmouth Police. I've called them and they told me it's a DEM issue. I've called DEM numerous times. Once DEM came down to my house, never mind the illegal fishing, because that's a closed area. So that's a whole nother issue. So I called DEM comes down once last year. And he apologized profusely, and he said he was the only one that was working the whole East and West Bay. There's nobody policing this, and our beaches are being destroyed. And this is only gonna get exponentially worse. So for those reasons, I implore you to please not endorse this bill.
Okay. Mr. President, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of Representative Corcoran, if I could.
Thanks. We're just gonna,
Sorry. I don't think I'm going to make any new points, but I, would be remiss if I didn't come up and say, my name is Karen Landry. I'm at 101 Baker Road. Like everyone else here, I do feel that it is, if you're taking 6 more feet, that 6 feet has to come from somewhere. And where else is it going to come from but the property owner's property? I also am worried about the fact that you have people that might trespass on property. It's not clear. I don't know why we have to redefine the mean high water mark. It seems to me that this is something that survived time. This seems to be a bill looking for a problem. And as many people have said, the problems are elsewhere. People have access, around Portsmouth in many different locations. So it's not, if we need more access points, are we finding that those are fully utilized and people can't find their way to the water? To me, it seems like that's not really the issue. I'm not sure why we have to change something that's been defined for hundreds of years, to add 6 feet to it, to then have a dispute about what property ownership is and what the taking of, and you don't want to, it doesn't seem like the bill considers compensation fully for the property owner. So I don't know what this bill is trying to address. If people have access, if, we have the definition of mean high water mark, why can't they just follow that process? If it is really the issues that others have brought forward, people, being loud and so forth, why aren't we addressing that with a different bill, as opposed to this bill that doesn't seem to do anything but try to take 6 feet of somebody's property? Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Portman. I just had a couple of questions. There seems to be a bit of kind of conflating shoreline access issues in the debate tonight. We're talking about access from, say, a public road to the beach, so vertical access versus lateral access along the shoreline. This bill does not in any way address vertical access. I'm presuming.
Perpendicular access. No.
Perpendicular access.
Right, no.
So whether it passes or not does not affect the number of rights of way to the
No.
shoreline.
No, it does not.
It does, so whether it's passed or not does not affect that in any way. It also doesn't affect in any way its passage or non-passage of the behavior of people once they get to the shoreline.
No, it does not.
So it has no effect either way. It can pass or it can not pass, and it won't really affect people doing all this horrible
Those
stuff.
things, we're not creating a zone of lawlessness because those things are already
Already happened,
illegal
right. So
and
they
they're
will-
already illegal.
Right, so they will continue to happen or not happen, whether this bill is passed or not.
That is true.
So I guess my only question then, since it doesn't really have any effect on rights of way to the shoreline, and since it doesn't do anything to rein in or enable misbehavior of people who get to the shoreline, I guess its only purpose really is to clarify maybe once people are hopefully legally at the shoreline, how they can move lateral to the water's edge, and that's really
Where?
all this bill talks
Right,
about.
that is right.
All right.
Define the where people can exercise their constitutional
Right.
rights that are articulated in the
Once they're at the
Constitution.
shore. It
Once
doesn't
they're
affect
at
how
the
they
shore.
get there. It
Correct.
just affects what happens
Correct.
once they're there.
And mean high water, as you said, just for everyone, for the record, it does move. It's not static. And in other places, it is true, it does not move, move some here, but on other shores, and this bill is a Rhode Island bill, and on other places in the state, it moves considerably. And we heard that from coastal scientists. And one other thing, a question that was asked was, how did we come up with the 6 feet? That actually came from, we had a retired Supreme Court justice serving on the study commission, Judge Frank Flaherty. And he actually said on the record that he did not want Rhode Islanders. He didn't think Rhode Islanders should have to get their feet wet in the winter if they wanted to go for a walk along the shore and it happened to be high tide. So that is why we wanted to have this band above high tide. So that is just for the record where that actually came from.
Okay, so I guess really the legal issue here is whether in fact enacting this law, when the statute actually does constitute a taking of private property or not. I think that is really the only real issue here. So how confident are we as to how this this action is being interpreted, how it will.
We had the attorney general had a representative that was on the commission. She abstained from the vote because she realized that they may have to defend this in court someday. So, but she felt confident that they would support, they would defend it. They would defend it.
Okay, so as far as we know, the Attorney General feels that this law does not constitute a taking of private property.
They would defend it.
They would
They
defend
would defend it in court.
Okay, all right.
Not
Well,
a lawyer, I mean,
yeah,
You know,
that's.
I'm not a
okay.
lawyer.
Right, and he would defend it means you feel it would be constitutional and not a taking. A taking is a particular legal term that means you are taking somebody's property.
Yes,
He would defend it because he does not consider it a taking.
correct. And he had a representative on the commission. It was not Attorney General Peter Nerona on the commission.
His designee.
Yes,
And I will tell you that obviously Frank Flaherty is one of the more brilliant minds that ever. I don't know if necessarily not getting your feet wet is a legal justification.
I'm telling you how the
I did not
conversation
know
came
where
up.
that came from. And can I make one more broad comment? If you are camping and you are below the high water mark and high tide comes, your tent's underwater. I mean, that I grew up here. Your tent's underwater. You get wet.
All right, so what do we got? We have a comment online.
The comment just wants to know who you're representing, because everybody here is against what the bill says. I think you already answered that you have other constituents who are in favor of the bill.
Yes, correct.
All right. I don't know if there's any more public comments, or if there are,
You're halfway up. You can come up and speak. I don't know what you're doing. You're stretching.
Bill Collins, 37 Baker Road. Based on what Terry just said, it just strikes me that if Frank really wanted to take a walk on the beach during the winter and high tide, he should bring his boots, just like we do when we're walking in the snow. I mean, I don't mean that anything to disrespect the judge, but the fact of the matter is you take and make an effort to deal with the situation when you go out doing things.
I had not heard that anecdote before tonight. Mr.
Well,
Collins,
I believe it. I believe it.
Oh, I do too. And I believe you sent me a very nice note earlier. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have no real objection about
No,
defining what we're talking about. I mean, you can see tonight, there's like 30 people have talked, and there's 30 different opinions as to what it should be. But the overall opinion is that A, we shouldn't be fixing things that aren't broken. B, we shouldn't be looking for problems where they're not. And at the same time, we need to be able to work cooperatively with one another. We shouldn't have to be, I don't believe we should be refereeing a fight down in Charleston by taking a one-size-fits-all approach to the state. Although for uniformity, the law has to be uniform. It just can't be from place to place.
You don't want to come across from Middletown, all of a sudden get arrested in Portsmouth.
Well,
I remember
that
when you were in
happens.
Newport, you had the Friends of the Waterfront, and I know they always got along with everybody.
Oh, yeah, yeah, to a point. But I think it's very important that we do define what our rights are so that we know where we're in the right and where people who want to take a walk on the beach, where they are in the right.
And Mr. Collins, can I just say this? Because there has been this suggestion that we created a problem by putting this legislation forward. The Constitution said people have a right to this.
Oh, yeah. It's very vague.
Only thing this legislation tries to do is define that right. Now, there certainly can be people who say, no, I want it over here, or no, I want it over here. That's reasonable argument. We're trying to find a place that is easily identifiable. But the problem, if it is a problem, exists. We're trying to define people's rights within that problem. And I think this is a worthwhile way to try and do that.
I do too. I mean, I don't, the specifics are the specifics. No one's gonna, no one will agree with everything. But the fact of the matter is, you gotta come on to common ground somewhere. And you have to know where your rights are and how far they extend and where someone else's rights also extend. And you gotta be able to give and
You're
take.
right to swing
If
your
you-
fist, it ends at my nose.
Right. I will say though, the only thing I don't want to see is, I don't want to see some Yahoo coming up coming down the road, trying to do a pirouette off the seawall or down the riprap to get to the water. I mean, that's not what I'm looking for. I don't want to have to insure for that. And I have to carry insurance. Other people have stated they've had to carry insurance. I have to carry insurance for that reason too, because this is a litigious society and I mean, the state can say what they want. I think 40 years ago, the state had a $200,000 limit on liability.
I
And
do not.
that's not
believe
even
the
gonna cover
state-
something if someone gets a hangnail out.
I don't believe the state's liability limit really impacts this situation. I will tell you that I believe that the law in Rhode Island is pretty much still, if someone's trespassing on your land, you only owe them a basically due care. You don't put any obstacle in their place. You don't dig a hole that they can
Right.
fall in. So I understand we are worried about litigation, but I do not believe this poses, and Mr. Katzman was asking earlier, you know, how often have we had a problem with this particular situation at the beach? I don't know of that many instances where somebody has been sued around here for having fallen on somebody else's land off of an access point.
Well, I guarantee you, once this thing starts to go on, you'll find that more and more of that happening. That people look for an easy access to do that type of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I will ask for one particular thing, though. I think any legislation that does come out of this, after the state has the hearing on it, I do believe we need to spell it out in unequivocal terms, what we're saying. It's got to be, I think we really need to have laws that address what the common man has to see in the law and understand the law. It's not just for lawyers, you know, it's for us. And at the same time, every law that they pass through the legislature, at least some laws, have a statement of legislative intent. When I read this, I didn't see that statement of legislative intent. And I think it would be a good idea because we don't want to be reinventing the wheel 10 years from now on this very subject because we have a judge that decides to do a little creative judging.
Are you ready for the legislative intent?
Yeah.
It'll make it as clear as mud.
That's,
The act would provide a definition of a recognizable high tide line for public rights and privileges of the shore.
okay, because we're
That's
talking
what it's
about the
stated to
high
do.
tide line, we're talking about the high water line. They're two different
It
things.
says high tide line, actually.
I know, I realize that.
I
That's the
understand
point. There's, that these terms are used extremely loosely in our law. And in this particular legislation, I think it quotes both of them.
Mr. Collins, I will tell you that in order to enforce a law against an individual, it has to have enough specificity that the person knows they violated the law. Now, throwing stuff on the beach, you don't need a sign there that tells you you shouldn't do it.
Right.
All right, number of things that people have talked about, you don't need a sign. But this, I think you would probably need signage that said, look, here's your rights, stay within them, and we can all be happy.
Well, we maybe we'll have less fights about it and things like
Less
that.
fight.
I don't know if you can fix stupid with that. Anyway,
Thank you, Mr.
thank you.
Collins. Is there anyone else?
Good evening, members of the council, and hello, Councilman Levesque. It's been a long time. My name is Topher Hamblett. I'm 219 Washington Road, Barrington, Rhode Island. I am with Save the Bay. And I served on this, represented Save the Bay on the study commission that Rep. Portfran chaired. It was comprised of attorneys, scientists, coastal geologists, and other folks. And I can tell you that the process was very rigorous. And the experts, a couple of things I would like to say. The experts at URI, the scientists, determined that most of the time, the mean high water mark which is an 18.5 year average, is underwater. Most of the time, it's underwater. And therefore, as our final report said, our constitutional right to walk along the shoreline is illusory. I think that's very, very important. There were attorneys, we had intense discussions about takings and such. And yes, we did hear from people testifying before the commission that there were concerns about takings. But I can tell you that there was, among the attorneys on the commission itself, there was intense discussion about that issue. And there was, in the end, a great comfort level with the recommendation that this legislation be put in and move forward. There also is a recommendation that whatever we come up with, there actually does need to be signage and intensive education by CRMC about where people are allowed to go along the shore and where they're not. This just says nothing about what you can do when you're on the shore. It says nothing, does not make legal any activity that is currently illegal. But what it does is in effect restore a right that has been lost over time to rising seas. So there is a need for clarity for both anyone who wants to walk along the shore and for property owners along the shore as well. So can I promise you that it would withstand a legal challenge? No. But I can tell you that this process was very, very rigorous. And I think the issue got a very thorough vetting. I can also tell you that this doesn't apply just to the South Coast. I myself have been fishing along wet, slippery rocks on the shore in the Upper Bay and had someone attempt to shoo me off their property, what they said was their property. So this is for all of Rhode Island and all Rhode Islanders. So I really, I want to commend Representative Portfran for an excellent process that she ran, a very thoughtful bill that was passed unanimously by the House last year, and we hope will pass the Senate this year. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments from the public? Question? Well, it's not really, it's not a public hearing. It's not. Oh, well, hold on one second.
It's this 6 foot thing again. So the reason the 6 feet went in is because when you're walking at high tide, the tide comes up, you don't want to get your feet wet. So if you're at my house, here's my yard, here's some rocks, the high tide comes up halfway to those rocks. Right? High tide. So if I'm on the shore, I'm digging clams. and the high
Ma'am,
tide
this is.
Well, I'm talking to
I
them
know,
because
this
they're
is-
the ones that brought this up. So if the high tide comes up.
Right.
All right, I'm wet, right? But I got 6 more feet, right? So I can not get my feet wet? Is that the intent?
They're not allowed.
But
to cross.
I have 6 more feet, right?
But you can't go on your property.
Not allowed to cross your
See what?
yard, but based on
They
the,
can't come up,
they can't come up onto the grass. If you have grass and then slope,
and
Or you-
grass, and then here are the rocks that start coming down. So they could come up on the rocks, right?
They
The
come up on
slippery
the- they
rocks,
could
so
come up on the
on the slippery rocks right in my, right on my backyard at that level, at my yard level, those rocks right here. They're not a seawall.
it's based on the way it's written. that
Here's
would
my
be-
yard, here
yeah.
are the rocks at the same level.
Yeah.
Can they come up there?
They
to
could come
walk?
up onto the rocks, but not onto
Your grass.
vegetation is what is in the ordinance.
All right.
Or in the law.
So if my grass dies back a few feet, then they could walk up on them.
No, it's the vegetation line.
Who gets to decide that?
Well, that becomes the enforcement issue that I think is also a,
How, so my question, I guess, is how does this law from Charleston,
well, this is
Word
a
resting.
state law. It's a state law.
but
know.
we're voting on a Charleston law right now.
No,
To support it.
it's
We're
just-
voting to support it. A Charleston law.
No.
Portsmouth is voting to support the law that they're trying to put forward.
No, the law is already, the law was passed last year, but.
What
just
is
let me
it you're
finish.
voting
Just
on
let
then?
me finish. I'll try to explain. Like, give me a minute.
What's passed last year?
That it was passed 2 years ago.
I know that.
But
yeah.
then it
Didn't clear the
have a
Senate.
complimentary, so it's got to go back.
Right.
So Charleston is asking for support
That's-
of that, but it still has to go to it still has to be approved.
Right, so like I said, you're voting to support that.
The
from-
state law.
From Charleston,
Charleston is asking for.
for your,
support.
our support from Portsmouth, right? That's what we're voting on. Pretty much what I said.
Yes.
Okay. And so now I lost my question, which was.
And we're just trying to stay on point.
Which was, okay, so how does that law, if we can't decide on, I don't know if it's mean high tide or mean watermark, right? Not even sure about that. But if we can't decide on where that is, then how do we decide where 6 feet from it is? My question is, and I don't want a scientific, is how is this clarifying it more? And how are we gonna put signs up? Is that gonna be in front of everybody's property on the shore, so we destroy the way the shore looks?
It's not 6 feet from mean high water. It's 6 feet from wherever the average high tide line might be.
Oh, okay, because you
So
guys
it's-
were having a fight about mean height.
Right,
water
it's
line.
not, that's why it's not 6 feet from mean high water. It's 6 feet from the average high tide line.
Right,
So in theory,
No.
in.
and is that something everybody agrees on, where it is?
What?
The mean high tide line,
No, because it's gonna vary.
right,
It's gonna vary.
right,
If I may, the
Right.
bill at the General Assembly does not define the line as a mean anything.
right.
It's defined as the recognizable
High tide.
high tide line, which is a visible mark left as determined by, for example, line of seaweed, oil, scum. So they're talking about a visible line.
Recognizable.
Whether that's the right standard or not, that's what they're talking about. There's no mean high tide.
Right, so it's high tide line. And,
It's-
and what was it prior to this? High tide line, right?
It
No,
was,
no,
was-
it-
No.
No,
before it's
it's-
mean high water.
it was.
So-
Like you said
which is-
before, mean high
So
water.
now it's high
below,
tide,
now it's high tide.
but 6 feet above.
Potentially.
6 feet above, but not in your case, because 6 feet above would put somebody into your property.
And then when that happens, I call the police.
Correct.
Great.
To be
Okay, thanks.
fairly honest, you folks on Baker are not gonna have many issues, because you can't really get to the water down there. But I mean, it's a tough walk. I've done it once. It's a tough walk.
All right, so I think we're done with comments from the public. What's that?
So I just wanted to thank you, Mr. President, just really quick to clarify. This is a General Assembly bill, a statewide proposed bill. The town of Portsmouth passes resolutions in favor of or opposed to all kinds of things all the time. Whenever we pass a resolution that says we're in favor of something or against something, we circulate it to the other 39 cities and towns. It ends up on their council agendas, just like theirs end up on ours. So this is not a Charlestown bill. This was someone in Charlestown happened to draft a resolution, ended up in the correspondence. But it speaks to the state, to the General Assembly bill, not to anything specific to Charlestown. And we're not voting on, or no one's made a motion to, but were we to vote on, we wouldn't be voting on a Charlestown resolution. We would make it a Portsmouth resolution, just as any other community would make a Portsmouth resolution theirs. I hope that added clarity. If not, I tried.
Mr. President. I realized, I'm sorry, but I was gonna make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we approve of the request to support the legislation as it had been presented. And if I get a second, I would like to speak briefly to the motion.
I'll make a comment.
What's
I
that?
think the only thing that became pretty clear from this entire process is that this is not something that as a town council, we should be voting on.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Turn off your microphone and
Turn
my
your microphone
speaker
on.
might go back on. No, turn it off. Then you might, can you hear me now? Coming through the speaker. I think that overall across the state, this bill has tremendous support. There was a lot of work put into developing it. So I think there probably is merit in the intent of the bill. But as we saw here tonight, there is a whole laundry list of issues that probably need to be aired out at a hearing up at the State House. And as a town council, I don't think we can vote to support it or vote to not support it. So I would vote that we don't vote on it.
By not seconding it.
If I could, I am apprehensive because I don't know that a motion to table would normally mean we could bring it back down off of the table. So I think somehow or another, we would have to resolve the question before us, either with an aye vote or a no vote.
There's no second.
This bit, no one seconded it, your motion.
Yeah, but I don't know if it just wafts off into the hyperspace.
Without a second, I would believe that it wafts.
And I do want to briefly speak to all of you folks. I appreciate your concern, I really do. I lived in this town all my life. I've walked the waters of this town all my life. All right. The complaints that you have brought to us, by and large, have nothing to do with defining the rights that people have. They have the right as it stands. The right to traverse the water, the right to gather seaweed. Oh, you don't have to leave right now. Very well, but I, again, it's an attempt to actually address a concern and define it. You have succeeded this evening in having us not participate in that discussion. Time will tell whether that was a good thing. But thank you all for your participation.
Mr. Gleason?
I would just like to comment that one of the great things that we have in town is a harbor commission that is very experienced. It's a mixture of people here, Portsmouth citizens with lots of backgrounds, some boaters, some non-boaters, some with legal backgrounds, et cetera. And I have served on that committee, and I've also served as a liaison. They were very instrumental in getting the harbor management plan passed in this town, and I think some of those members on there were there for 12 or 13 years before that actually became a reality. But one of the things that they do ensure is that our right-of-ways are checked every year, and I just want to give them kudos for that. That group realizes the importance of access to the waterfront. This bill was perfect. I assure you that Harbor Commission would have supported it. But tonight we pointed out many weaknesses of the bill, and I think it's moving in the right direction. But as it's been said, it really doesn't apply to the citizens of Portsmouth as much as it would to somebody down on the Charleston waterfront. But I assure you that if it becomes that format and the Harbor Commission agrees that it's for the town of Portsmouth, it will be supported. Thank you.
No. A motion.
Last comment, if I could. I just wanted to say, I thank Representative Corcoran a lot for her work on this bill, and I have an absolute confidence that her continued work on this bill will result in a very good bill. But I agree with Councilman Abbott that we don't have the breadth of information that Representative Corcoran has had to accumulate in order to speak to this issue in an informed manner. So I look forward to seeing what the State House comes up with and Representative Corcoran's committee. I think our declining to vote on this resolution does not actually speak to whether we support the principles on which it is founded or not. I just feel that we don't know enough to make an informed decision. So I look forward to you continuing to do your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Okay, 10 o'clock. We're going to move on to new business number 5. To request approval for a resolution in support of bills H300.
Mr. President, if there is not a contingent here to talk on this legislation, I would ask that it also go to the netherworld where bills and proposals go to die.
Thank you.
Discretion is the better part of valor.
So on to new business number 6. Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
On to new business number 6.
On to do.
You're withdrawing your request.
Yep, no, I'm
Yes.
okay with that.
That was my purpose.
Withdraw it.
And just to observe, Mr. Levesque began that by saying, if there's no one here to speak to it, and it doesn't appear that there is, so that's.
I did, but I said that very low.
Yeah.
All right, okay. All right.
Bleachers, asbestos and roofs.
Requested.
Wow.
It's like a rhyme. Almost sounded pleasing. Request approval of capital projects using previously budgeted capital funds and the capital reserve fund for the following. Bleachers at the Little League field, asbestos remediation at the fire department. Request approval to award town hall roof replacement to Silvertown Roofing. Mr. Rayner.
Yes, as you just described, we have three urgent projects that require immediate attention. The first is the replacement of the bleachers at Sherman and Rooney Little League fields on East Main Road behind the old Coggeshall School. The current bleachers are deteriorated and they do pose a safety risk to families and children who use them. And we do have Little League season coming up. So we have received a cost estimate of $53,859 for the demolition of the existing bleachers and installation of new ADA compliant bleachers. We would still have to bid this out. That's just a quote. So I'm requesting approval of the expenditure of no more than $54,000 from the Capital Reserve Fund to replace the Little League bleachers at Sherman and Rooney Fields. Additionally, the second project involves the ongoing fire station first floor renovation project. It has been determined that the tiles on the first floor of the fire station contain asbestos, and they will have to be abated before the renovation project can continue. The fire station roof replacement project, which was previously authorized, finished under budget, leaving $23,100 in available funds for this. The abatement will cost $24,000. So I'm requesting approval to apply the remaining funds from the roof replacement project towards the needed asbestos abatement. And then the remaining funds needed for the abatement will be distributed from the fire department maintenance budget. And then lastly, the town hall roof replacement project is due to start this spring. The lowest bid received for the project is $258,000, and $6,300 has already been allocated for the construction administration, leaving $203,700 remaining for the work and materials. So I'm requesting approval for the expenditure of $54,300 from the Capital Reserve Fund to complete this project. What I've provided to you is that we currently have $472,631 in the Capital Reserve Fund. If we subtract out the cost for the bleachers and the town hall roof, we'll have about $319,000 left in the Capital Reserve Fund. So I thank you for considering these projects and request your approval.
I move that we approve as presented.
Second for a quick question. This is probably to Mr. Woodhead. There were, did I mess it up? 3 items left off the roof replacement?
There was three, add alternates. One was the roof hatch. Roof hatch is in good shape. The only problem is it doesn't have a railing on the side of it. That's new ADA compliant. One of the chimneys up there, the cap is cracked on the top. It's not it's not
Immediate.
immediate.
Okay.
And then the last one is gutters all the way around. The gutters are in great shape. We're not gonna replace the gutters. I think there was one over here that there was a tree overhanging it. It was kind of getting clogged up. We trimmed up the tree, so that's already taken.
My big concern was the condition of the hatch and that if it's still good,
It's in great shape. The only
it's not
thing,
gonna leak when we put the new roof on.
it didn't have a handrail. That was. It didn't have that.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments? All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And the final number 7 is request approval of proposed memorandum of agreement with the police union.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the change in the pricing of the detail fees. Those are just pass-throughs for projects that are coming in.
Second.
There's 2 items there. One is the changing of the detail pay, which as Mr. Hamilton stated, is a pass-through, no cost to the town. But the other thing is in order to attract lateral transfers, instead of bringing in all lateral transfers at the junior patrol rate, if they have more than 36 months, 3 years of full-time police experience, we would hire them at the senior patrol rate.
I would move we adopt that change
I-
as well.
Mr. President, if I
I'll,
may-
I'll amend my motion to accept both.
And my second.
Comment?
I don't know. I believe that the administrator might have advised me of one. I think I saw another one. There is a real competition going on between the community, which is very unfortunate, but and I say this mostly for the audience here. There are a number of communities bidding with bonuses, lateral transfers, significant increases, significant increases, I think, in salary. So it is something that I think we just have to be aware of, that it is becoming extremely competitive.
Yeah, this has been a hot topic at the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, on which I serve as an executive board member. The bottom line is we're all poaching from each other. There is a dearth of people interested in becoming police officers right now. Problem number one. Problem number two, in order to combat that, a number of cities and towns in Rhode Island are now offering sign-on bonuses and retention bonuses, which are just unaffordable for a small town like, a medium-sized town like Portsmouth. And three, there just aren't that many, I think I stated this already, young women, men and women that are interested in becoming police officers right now. And actually, number three, we can't, even if we had the number of people that would fill our ranks, we can't get the throughput because there's only 2 academies run a year. So we're trying to address that, but in the meantime, we do have a recruitment and retention problem in Portsmouth, and this, in some small way, will help keep the people that we have and maybe attract some lateral transfers.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have correspondence.
Mr. President, I move that the correspondence all be received and placed on file.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. On to future meetings, March 27th, and then we begin with the budgets, April 10th, April 24th, April 25th, April 26th, and if necessary, April 27th is our schedule for future meetings.
Just do this.
Seems like yes. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 0. We'll see everyone on the 27th.